Can you hear me? Yep. Hey everybody, good evening and thank you for being here tonight. The City of Seaside City Council special meeting for Thursday, September 29th, 2016. Roll call please.
Councilmember Jacob here. Councilmember Campbell here. Councilmember Alexander
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby
Here.
Mayor Rubio.
Here. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. And I don't know if we have a reverend in the house. Yes, we do. And by Reverend
Our eternal God, our Father, we thank you for this moment and for this privilege. We thank you for these people that are here this evening. Oh God, let your will be done. We glorify you in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we're going to do something a little bit different. Under oral communications, I've been asked to allow some school children to express their opinions so they can get home and do their homework and get to bed. So their comments will be about something that's on the agenda, but in the interest of our youth and being able to participate, we'll just go ahead and let them start off. They are what? Joanna, whichever one you get to first.
Thank you all for coming, and hopefully this can happen. We often hear adults talk about children today, and not always in a positive manner. But we stand before you tonight as a group of kids that have a productive and responsible outlet for our time. We are committed to learning, showing, and taking care of our horses every day. And there are more kids like us that aren't able to be here tonight. We will always remember the laughter, the memories, and even the tears at our horse shows that we drive 3 to 5 hours away for. Just think of what we can accomplish if we have an equestrian center in our own backyard. Please help support our goal of creating more memories, learning more skills, and growing into responsible adults with our friends. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I wanted to express my opinion on why this project would be extremely beneficial for the community. Years ago, when Fort Worth was an active military base, it was the place to be for young people. But then when it was shut down, there was really no draw. Not even just for equestrians looking to show, but hikers, cyclists, campers, and most outdoorsy people. The horse park would completely change that. Secondly, I've been riding horses since I was 2 years old. I've been ridden all over the country and all over the world, and I can honestly say that I've never met a community of equestrians quite like the ones in the Monterey Peninsula, and I'm so honored to be part of that group. The Monterey Horse Park would give everyone, all equestrians, the facilities necessary to pursue their passions. And as a competitive event rider at an amazing barn, my teammates and I spend a significant amount of money pursuing our dreams and our passions. And we've seen how that money benefits the communities where we show, but we would rather spend our money benefiting our own community in the communities of Seaside. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you guys for even considering this amazing opportunity for everyone. I would love it, all my teammates would love it, my horse trainer would love it, our barn would love it, and it would benefit all of us. So thank you for even considering this.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Okay, so to set the ground rules, that was a special presentation by young folks, and I think it's appropriate that we encourage them. But from this point on, no more clapping, no more hooting, no more cheers, or any outbursts of emotion. This is a business meeting, and it's not the planning commission meeting where it's a little bit loose of rules. We're a little bit more formal here, and we're going to adhere to those rules of conduct. And depending on how many people will be getting up, will determine how long the time will be for each comment. Right now, we'll go on to oral communications for items that are not on the agenda. Public comment period is now open for 3 minutes. Okay. We're going to conduct a public hearing. We're going to receive presentations from staff, DIR consultant, the project applicant, allow public comment, and then allow the council discussion, questions, and directions to staff. So at this time, I want to turn it over to Mr. Malin so he can get the order started. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go in order, and we expect to take breaks after each one of these agenda sections. We can all stand up and stretch just for a little bit. Let's understand we're trying to conclude the meeting at 10:30, unless the council decides otherwise at that time. And as we go through the presentation, staff and the applicant have asked, staff has asked that the council interrupt them at any time, and that's fine. The applicant has asked to proceed through their proceed through their presentation and then have the council ask questions. But what we're trying to do is engage your council early in the discussion, and then allow for public comment. And in order to have the public comment move maybe a little bit more efficiently, and a little more conveniently for everyone here, and not have a lot of downtime, everyone will see that we have two microphones, and there's two little taped lines on the floor. And all you need to do is pick whichever line and whichever microphone you want, and that way there's not a lot of downtime from people going from one microphone to the other, and the mayor will alternate as folks are making their comments. I think something that's important to understand early on in tonight's meeting is that this is a special meeting, and there are no votes that can or are expected to be taken this evening. This is a study session on the topic. It's part of the record that's developing for the project. And the project has just come on the planning commission. They most recently spent 2 evenings, one fairly lengthy evening, one a little bit more compressed evening. This meeting will be more like the first planning commission meeting, where there's an open discussion and likely no shortage of comments and questions. We're not expecting to take any votes tonight. The first votes that may happen for just these particular topics on the agenda would happen on October 13th, and then potentially follow-up votes on October 20th. One more thing that I think is important for everyone to understand is that the applicant is not a person, it's a corporation. So to the extent that we can have discussion about the project challenges and benefits, not individuals, I think we're all better served. And I think the city attorney has something to share as well. But otherwise, after that, our consulting planner will have the floor.
Just a couple of follow-up comments, if I might. I did this at the planning commission. This is a study session. I'm not going to be here for the meeting on October 13th or the 22nd. So I'm going to take this time to actually ask members of the city council regarding ex parte contacts. And the reason I'm doing that, I did that at the planning commission, as some of you may know. I'm doing it at the city council as well, because what I want to be able to do is ensure the integrity of the decision-making process, and that being that any decisions and discussions really take place in a public forum as opposed to anywhere else. So maybe we can start perhaps on my left with Council Member Campbell. And I want to know whether, while we have an applicant, we also have an opposition group, and I don't really know how to characterize them or define them, but they're seem to be 2 distinct separate groups. And what I'm looking for is just any kind of comment, if there have been contacts, for them just to say just briefly yes and who, and then just a line or 2 about what it is. The next thing is that if any member of the city council has not had an opportunity to actually visit the site or tour the site, I would recommend that any tour be actually hosted and granted, and hosted by city staff. If the council wishes to go as a whole, we would schedule that as a public meeting, as a tour of inspection, in which case the entire public would be entitled to attend that as well. But at this point in time, one additional thing, I guess, before we start, and that is that one of the things that keeps coming up, at least that I keep hearing, is, well, what's this really costing the city? At this point in time, when we enter into exclusive right to negotiate agreements, the applicants, all applicants for development in Seaside enter into an exclusive right to negotiate agreement, in which case they actually deposit funds with the city and we work from those funds. As those funds are depleted, the applicants are required to replenish those funds. But in addition to that, one of the things we also asked them to do, and we would do that in this particular case as well, is in the event of any type of litigation or legal proceeding, that we would insist upon having executed an indemnification agreement to ensure the city and the community and the residents that no taxpayers' money is really coming out of the general fund or from the city. It's all coming from the applicant to process this particular application or process, as well as defending if there are legal challenges. And that includes reimbursement for all staff time and any attorney time, anything of that nature. So there should be no monies actually coming from the city for this particular project. And now I would like to turn it over to Councilmember Campbell to just ask if there are any extraneous or ex parte contacts regarding this topic.
Nothing significant.
Nothing significant as well, just via my city email, invitation to visit the property, which I think was cleared up here by you.
None.
Nothing significant, I guess we run into the applicant and the people that are against and for the project itself, and just in, exchanging courtesies, and they're just telling me how they feel about it, but I would say nothing significant.
I had a meeting with a representative from Land Watch, I don't know his name, and then I spoke to some person that was a veteran in the military that was on the opposite side, speaking in favor of the project. And again, I don't know his name, we're just talking to people in my walks through the community.
That's fine. The purpose of this was to ensure that any decision that's not made this evening, but for the future meetings where I won't be in attendance, is that the decision is actually made in public meetings, it's not made outside of the meeting. And that was the big difference. And that concludes my remarks.
Okay. So, we'll call.
Good evening, Mayor Rubio, council members. Terry Whistler Adam, Seaside staff contract planner. And I'm going to be giving the staff presentation this evening.
Excuse me. And you did request that we can interrupt you at any time for a question?
Yes, if you have any questions about clarification of what I'm going to present, please do. Feel free to ask. I need to check with Leslie on how Thank you. So the agenda this evening again is the staff and EIR consultant presentations, the applicant presentation, public comment, and then we'll come back to the council for questions, discussion, and any direction you might have of staff. So our study topics tonight are only a few of the applications that the city has received. We're going to be discussing a specific plan, the general plan amendment, and the zoning code or ordinance amendment, which is the Seaside Municipal Code Title 17, and the EIR. So a little bit about the project site background. Project site is about 111 acres on the former Fort Ord. About 148 acres are currently within the Seaside city limits. And about 562 acres are in unincorporated Monterey County. Fort Ord was closed in 1994, and in 1997, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority adopted the base reuse plan, which designated the entire project site as a development parcel. In 2004, the city of Seaside adopted a general plan update to address their property in Fort Ord. And a little bit later in 2004, the FORA board made a determination that the Seaside City Plan was consistent with the base reuse plan. In 2005, FORA, the county, the Bureau of Land Management, the Army, and Monterey Peninsula College entered into an MOU regarding East Garrison Parker Flats land use modification. And that MOU affected approximately 520 acres of the project site and unincorporated county. It's also on the project site is a cemetery endowment fund parcel, which consists of about 31 acres. And in 2009, the city of Seaside, the county of Monterey, and FORA entered into an MOU regarding that cemetery endowment fund parcel, so that the property would be sold and the funds would then be used for maintenance of the cemetery. In 2012, the MOU was revised to include the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery Foundation as a signator. And in the specific plan, that endowment fund parcel is identified as residential. In 2010, Seaside Redevelopment Agency and Monterey Downs LLC entered into exclusive negotiating agreement regarding all the applications that you see before you. The application and the EIR process. In 2012, the city of Seaside received several applications associated with eventual development of the project site. The city embarked upon an EIR process. The draft EIR was completed and published in June of 2015, and the final EIR was published about 2 months ago, July 29, 2016. In addition to the study session tonight, 2 other study sessions have been conducted by the City Council in concert with the Planning Commission and the Board of Architectural Review, and those occurred on May 30th in 2013 and April 30th in 2015. Also on May 30th in 2013, we did take the City Council, the Planning Commission, and the Board of Architectural Review on a site tour of the property. And as Mr. Freeman mentioned earlier, staff would be happy to take any of the council members on the site tour if you were unable to join us or would just like to see it again. So the items that we are discussing this evening were before the Board of Architectural Review in July 1st of 2015, and again in on August 17, 2016. And what they reviewed were the specific plans, design guidelines, and development standards. And they prepared a set of recommendations for the Planning Commission and City Council regarding some changes they would like to see to the text of the specific plan, and we'll discuss those a bit later. The Planning Commission reviewed the items before you this evening on September 7th and again on September 21st. And recommended to the City Council that you certify the EIR, adopt the specific plan, approve the general plan amendment, and the zoning amendment. So a little bit about the location and the past description of the project site. Again, it's 711 acres, partially within the city and partially within unincorporated county. Was used in the past for military training. It's generally undeveloped with 1 large building and it's 9 very small structures with minimal people. So this is the project location. The large tan area is Fort Ord, former Fort Ord. Everything that encompasses the Fort Ord base reuse plan. You can see Seaside proper there, with Seaside kind of in the middle of it. And then the black outline is represents the Seaside city limits. The candy cane striping is the project site. It'd be a little bit difficult to see with the light, but you can see where a portion of it is in the city limits and a portion of it is outside the city limits. This is an aerial photograph and a boundary map that shows the project site and demonstrates the generally undeveloped nature of the site, mostly which consists of oak woodland. These are the designations in the base reuse plan land use concept. It includes designations that are originally from the 1997 base reuse plan. The changes that were made with the adoption of the Seaside General Plan and forest consistency determination of the general plan. And the rest of it, which has the white striping through it, is the property that was affected, for the project site, based upon the MOU for the Parker Flats East Garrison land use modification. So our first study topic tonight is the specific plan. The contents of the specific plan are governed by the California Government Code. Like a general plan, which identifies land use designations and goals and policies, a specific plan provides more detail on those land use designations and on development standards within a specific plan area. You can think of a specific plan as a general plan and zoning for that particular area that's covered by the specific plan. And you could also consider the specific plan as a master plan. But this is, on the screen is what the California Government Code tells us needs to be in a specific plan. And that's the distribution, location, and extent of land uses, the distribution, location, and extent and intensity of major components of public and private infrastructure, the standards and criteria by which development will proceed, and a program of implementation measures, including regulations, programs, public works projects, and financing measures necessary to carry out the project. And the Monterey Downs draft specific plan does include all of these topics.
Question?
Yes.
Specific plan, I was reading that the specific plan would essentially trump any municipal codes. Is that a fair way to describe it, that it supersedes any, if there's something in there that contradicts a Seaside municipal code, it would actually supersede it?
I don't think it trumps the entire municipal code, but it does become the zoning for the property. So it is in effect the zoning ordinance or the zoning code for the property. If there is something that the specific plan is silent on, then it reverts back to the municipal code.
But if, I'm sorry, I didn't mean the entire municipal code. I just mean if there's elements that contradict each other, whatever it might be, land use or something like that, what's legal, what's not, this plan would actually supersede the municipal code.
It becomes the land use designations and the zoning for the property, if the specific plan is adopted. Yes, it doesn't trump the municipal code, but it does become the land use designations and the zoning for the property. And that's why when, we'll get a little bit further into it, we'll talk about the general plan amendment and the zoning ordinance amendment. Both of those would need to occur along with adoption of the specific plan. So the specific plan actually becomes a part of the general plan and becomes the zoning for the property.
So just one last time, and if any part of it conflicts with the municipal code, it is the overriding document.
Generally.
Thank you.
Okay, so vested development rights. Adoption of a specific plan or approval of the general plan or zoning amendments does not give the applicant or any developer vested rights for developing the property. Vested development rights would accompany the vesting tentative map, should it be approved, and that map will be studied by the city council and considered at a later date. So this is the specific plan land use map that, again, generally would also amend the general plan and the zoning ordinance. This specific plan includes provisions for up to 880 single-family homes, and those are in the areas that are yellow, generally yellow, that are RES 1, 2, and 3. Up to 400 multifamily homes, including student apartments. And that's the tan area in the center of the property that is identified as RM. Up to 256 workforce lodging units that will be up in the far upper right corner of the property. Up to 535,000 square feet of retail and commercial uses, including 2 200-room hotels, and that is in the pink and the red portions, known as identified as C1 and C2. A nonprofit equestrian park, which is identified as REC1 in the lower right half. The Veterans Cemetery with ancillary parcels, which is the dark green area on the bottom left. Public facilities, including a city corporation yard, Marina Coast Water District water tank parcel, and a site for a fire station, if determined to be necessary, are identified as the gray areas, also identified as PF. The project also includes 2 staging areas for access to the Fort Recreational Habitat Area lands and the National Monument further beyond that. In those 2 areas, one is located in the red area, the C2 area adjacent to the open space, and the other one is on the far right in the Rec 1 area just south of the open space. The specific plan also includes 4 miles of hiking, biking, and equestrian trails, 12 acres of mini neighborhood and community parks, and 73 acres of open space, which is the Oak Oval, the medium green, and the center right area. This is also in the specific plan. It's an illustrative conceptual site plan, basically the same land uses that I just discussed. All the residential is in the western area, and it moves on to the multifamily residential, the commercial, and then the 2 equestrian facilities. This is the Veterans Cemetery site plan. As you know, phase 1 is complete or nearly complete, and there's I believe, a grand opening next month. And that is an area just south of Parker Flats Road. North of Parker Flats Road is the endowment fund opportunity parcel that I spoke about earlier that would be sold to a developer to use for maintenance funds for the cemetery. So staff looked at the specific plan and evaluated it for its consistency with the city's general plan and relevant general plan policies. That analysis was included as Exhibit J of the staff report, and the analysis concludes that the specific plan is consistent with relevant general plan policies. We also looked at the specific plan's consistency with the base reuse plan. If the city council approves the specific plan, we'll need to take the specific plan to the Fort Reuse Authority for them to make a determination whether the project is consistent with the base reuse plan. So we did do a draft analysis, and it's a draft because it has not yet been reviewed by forest staff, and there's a process that we need to go through for that. But a draft of that analysis is included as Exhibit K of the staff report, and staff concluded that the specific plan is generally consistent with the base reuse plan. So there are several staff recommended changes to the specific plan. A little history here. When the applicant submitted the specific plan several years ago, staff reviewed it, gave comments, and it went back and forth for several iterations where staff felt that it could move forward in the process. As we continue to evaluate it, we have identified various minor clarifications and corrections, and then have also identified the following substantive changes. The first is Chapter 2, Table 2.2, permitted uses. This is a table in the specific plan that identifies what all the permitted uses would be. It's staff recommendation to eliminate horse racing as an allowed use and modify language throughout the specific plan where horse racing is referenced. Staff believes that horse racing is not fiscally sustainable as the horse racing industry is in decline according to California Horse Racing Board annual reports. Also in your staff report, there is an exhibit. I don't have the number, but we've taken all of the pages of the specific plan that we're recommending changing and included in there. So you'll see in that table where we've modified that. The next one is adding a standard that encourages the use of universal design principles to facilitate the development of housing to accommodate residents of all abilities. And this was for a little bit more consistency with the general plan. We're also requesting adding a standard that civic art be encouraged in both public and private development projects, again, consistent with general plan policies. Chapter 8 is implementation of the specific plan, and we are recommending including some additional language in the tentative map review to clarify the process for identifying wooded areas and individual trees. And it's basically the tentative maps will need to identify the location of all wooded areas, and final maps would identify the location, sizes, and types of existing trees that have a circumference greater than 19 inches. These are the Board of Architectural Review recommended changes to the specific plan. They are recommending that one of the development standards regarding side yard setbacks be changed on lots less than 3,750 square feet, and they want to increase the proposed minimum side setback from 3.5 feet to 4 feet. They also want to modify the minimum building separation between buildings to increase that minimum separation from 7 feet to 8 and 10 feet on alternating lots. Another development standard they wanted to add is to ensure that privacy is maintained between adjoining two-story dwellings on lots less than 3,750 square feet. They want to offset the second-story windows to avoid having the second-story windows directly face each other. And I think the reason that they're focusing on the 3,750 square feet lots is because those are the smallest lots that are allowed within the specific one area. The last one here is single-family dwelling courtyard. Residential building height should not exceed 2 stories when it's adjacent to a detached single-family neighborhood. And they want to include some additional language and requirements during the development review and application procedures. They want to require the submittal of cross-sections as a design detail to provide perspective of the street contours and grading patterns between adjoining blocks. Another one is to include a statement that states opportunities for the placement of solar energy products and installation of wind protection barriers should be considered in the urban design process for each development phase. So the second study topic tonight is the general plan amendment. And again, the specific plan can't be approved unless the general plan is amended. And it basically consists of amending the general plan figures or maps to incorporate the project site, because the general plan map currently only incorporates that portion of the project site that is currently within the city limits. Go one further. So this is what the map would look like. It's a big purple project site in the middle there with the current Seaside boundary running through the middle. So that's what the general plan land use policy map would look like, and all the other maps in the general plan that are applicable would also be revised to include this. If you could go back one, Leslie. Thank you. The text also of the general plan would need to be amended. The city currently has 2 other specific plans, the Main Gate specific plan and the West Broadway Urban Village specific plan. Both of those are identified in the general plan, and so similar to those, text would be added to the general plan urban design element. So all the text in red, which basically explains what types of uses are allowed within the specific plan and what the vision for the specific plan is. The third study topic is the zoning ordinance amendment, and again, the zoning ordinance would need to be amended if the specific plan is approved. The zoning ordinance is Title 17 of the Seaside Municipal Code. And just like the general plan, both the map would need to be amended and text would need to be amended. And this is what the map would look like. Similar to the general plan map, the zoning map would be updated to include the entire project site. There's a bit more text for the zoning ordinance, again, to be consistent with the city's discussion of the other two specific plans in the zoning ordinance. There would be a purpose and intent, which is similar to the language we just looked at for the general plan. It's basically a discussion of what's allowed within the specific plan area. The next is applicability, and how the specific plan is the document that would guide land use policies, development standards, and design guidelines, and all future development of the specific plan. You should do the back one. Okay, that's fine. So the next one is fine. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Rita Garcia. She's the project manager with Michael Baker International that prepared the EIR. She's going to give you a presentation on the EIR. And actually, I guess before I turn it over to Rita, are there any questions on the information that I presented?
You said the planning commission recommended that the city council certify this. So what did they base that on? Their recommendation?
We presented a similar presentation that you're receiving tonight. They reviewed the specific plan and the EIR, and they voted 3-2 to make those recommendations. I haven't seen the minutes yet, but I'm sure the minutes would probably provide you the information that you might be looking for.
Okay. The specific plan land use map that you showed for the base use plan seems to be in conflict with our general plan map. I think it was page 10 and page 13. They seem to be. Yes, that one there shows no residential, and then everything to the east of the seaside boundary, and that's in the general plan seems to show residential there. Is that?
So the Seaside general plan only includes those properties that are currently in the city limits. So that's the property that is left of that black line. Let's see if I get there's this black line here. This is the city limit line right here. So everything to the west is in the city, and everything to the east is an unincorporated county. So in the city, the Seaside general plan identifies this parcel as that says high density residential, and this as open space recreation, veteran cemetery.
And then the specific plan land use map, I think that's on page 13. And everything to the east of that line, it's not consistent, is basically what I'm seeing there. The two.
Everything east of the city limit line?
Yes.
Yeah, there's none of this is in the city's general plan. this property is not in the general plan.
Right, and the specific plan that's what we're doing here, is incorporating it into
Yes,
that's what we're being asked to do.
correct. There, a little bit later in my presentation, after Rita is finished, we'll talk about future actions that would be required by the city council that they're not part of the study session tonight. Some of those future actions are amending the city's sphere of influence, annexation. So yes, the proposal is to annex all of the property into the city limits.
Okay, I just want to be clear that it looks to me like a specific plan, land use map, and the base reuse plan, land use map from the MOU are significantly different. I'm just bringing that up. And then the last thing is staff recommends we remove horse racing from specific uses because it's not fiscally sound. Is that generally the idea?
Yes.
However, we're leaving a training facility and all the other things. Is that considered fiscally sound?
I may need to defer to the city manager on this one.
Horse training is an expanding industry across the country, an expanding business across the nation. Horse racing in California is regulated by the Horse Racing Board. They publish annual reports, and if you look through their annual reports, one of the consistent metrics they report on is the amount of money wagered on California horse races. So you can track that over time. That is not growing. Thank you. That is in decline. It's in decline by about 40% in the last 10 years when you adjust for inflation. So the horse racing industry, by the metric of how much money is wagered on horses, that race in California is in clear and substantial decline. Whereas horse training, horse shows, horse enthusiasts spending money is a growing business in many parts of the country. Obviously, here in Seaside, we don't have that industry. It won't have that industry unless a project like this is ultimately approved by the council and built.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to see some charts showing that a horse racing facility, a horse training track is in growing demand.
Are there any other questions from the council?
Just one, thank you. I've become aware that there is a concern around the recommendation of the planning commission as to what it was based on. And even though you haven't seen the minutes, do we know that we have some certainty that it was based on its environmental impact, given there's a lot involved in this project?
They did consider the environmental impact report in their decision. So part of their recommendation was to certify the environmental impact report as adequate.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions of council at this time?
Yeah, so one thing, when, as we go through this, are we going to focus in on the actual elements of the EIR? Because I have several questions, but I think it might be better if I wait till that.
Yeah, Rita's going to give a presentation on the major points in the EIR, and then of course is available to answer any questions that aren't already answered by her presentation.
Now, the second question I have in regards to that, do we have available the tables and numbers from the base reuse EIR so that we can extrapolate, impacts? I know that there are some elements in the base reuse plan in the EIR that call out specific acreages for oak woodland, but I looked through and I was trying to find what their specific count, because there's a specific count of trees in here, but I don't know if there was one for the base-wide plan.
Mr. Mayor, Rita Garcia with Michael Baker International, Project Manager for the EIR. Because this is a subsequent EIR, included right before each impact analysis section in the environmental issue areas is a summary of the findings of the base reuse plan EIR. So to specifically answer the question regarding trees, we'd have to dig a little to see what the conclusion was. I don't recall that the actual number of trees that were being removed or anticipated to be removed with implementation of the BRP was identified, but the conclusions and findings are summarized in the EIR in each environmental area.
Thank you.
Just for my clarification, you said you presented this very similar presentation to the Planning Commission and the bar, and then the Planning Commission and the bar made some changes, you said, recommendation changes to.
Yes, the Board of Architectural Review recommended some changes to the language in the specific plan. The Planning Commission did not make any recommended changes.
To the EIR?
To the specific plan.
But so all of these ones that you mentioned came from the bar?
Some of them from staff and some of them from the bar.
And they were talked to or discussed with the Planning Commission?
Correct.
They didn't add, they didn't take away, but they discussed them, they agreed with them. They didn't take it away, they didn't take it away, right?
They didn't comment on any of the changes that staff or the board were recommending.
But they heard them?
Yes. Yes. They were in their packet and we discussed them in similar fashion like we discussed them this evening.
Right. So whether I agree with the civic art and public places and private places, we still discussed it with me. I heard it. And if I agree, I say something. If I don't agree, I don't need to say anything.
Exactly. And when the specific plan comes back to you for a vote, which is currently scheduled for October 13th, at that time, it's not everything or nothing. I mean, it's within your purview to accept staff's recommendations, the board's recommendations, some of them, none of them, or make your own changes.
No, yeah, I understand my purview, but I'm talking about the bar and the planning commission. My point is, just because they don't comment on something doesn't mean they did not internalize that and base a decision on that information that they may have gleaned from your presentation.
Correct.
And I just want to emphasize one thing, both the bar and the planning commission are advisory bodies to the city council. We're the final arbitrators of this document and the process and acceptance or non-acceptance of any of the conditions or specific plans or changes to the general plan.
So Leslie, can we switch to Rita's presentation?
Mr. Mayor, while she's doing that, the answer to your question, at least in part, is on page 4.3-32 of the EIR concerning the loss of oak woodland within the BRP. It identifies a loss of approximately 1,584 acres of woodland area. So as far as the number of trees, I don't think that necessarily can be extrapolated, but that's the acreage.
Right, and we're anticipating
315 acres.
right, okay. So we're within the environmental constraints of the base reuse plan. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council and public, my name is Rita Garcia with Michael Baker International, as you've heard earlier, and my role in this was to serve as project manager for preparation of the EIR. With me tonight are Robert Davis, who's a traffic engineer, and Dan Rossi, who is our biologist, and we are available to answer any questions should you decide to ask questions during the presentation or after, whatever your preference. Tonight, I will be sharing with you a brief overview of the project's CEQA process, and will highlight some of the key environmental issue areas for which significant unavoidable impacts were determined. Shown in this slide, in its simplest form, the project's CEQA review process and included 5 key milestones, which were release of the notice of preparation, which conveyed to the public the city's intent to prepare an EIR, preparation of the actual draft EIR, preparation of responses, and those were responses to comments received on the draft EIR, and preparation of the final EIR. And the final EIR includes the list of all of the comments received, all of the comment letters received, responses to each of the comments received, the draft EIR, and an errata to the draft EIR, and then finally the findings and resolution. Just more specifically, the draft EIR was released on March 31st, 2015. It was initially released for a 63-day public review period, but was then extended an additional 18 days. In total, the draft EIR was released for public review from March 31st through June 19th for a total of 81 days. During the public review period, we received a total of 279 letters. That included 22 letters from public agencies and 268 letters from persons and organizations. In addition, we received 45 comments at the public workshop. All of the data was compiled, and the final EIR was prepared and released on July 29th, 2016. As a side note, I've been doing, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Ms. Amanda, can you explain for just a moment for the public why it's called a subsequent EIR? Because I think a lot of people think this is an EIR standing alone. But if you could explain that so people get that clear.
Sure. So this, so CEQA allows a tiering, and this would be a tier 2 document. There's a tier 1 document, which is the base reuse plan, and CEQA allows you for a project that was part of that earlier tier 1 document to, if there are changes in the uses, or there's new or greater impacts, to prepare a subsequent EIR that would focus on those new or greater impacts for any changes from what was anticipated in the tier 1 document. So in that regard, it tiers off of all of the analysis and conclusions that was in the tier 1 document, the base reuse plan EIR, and this being a subsequent EIR or the tier 2 document.
And it's anticipated that the EIR will not intensify or change any of the balances created in the first EIR.
Sure, I have a slide that specifically addresses and provides a comparison of the base reuse plans, anticipated land use, the base reuse updates, anticipated land use, and compares it to the proposed project. If you'd like, I could go to that now.
No. I just wanted to ask those questions up front.
I'd like to jump in on that too. Just there is a section of the CEQA guidelines that specifically refers to projects that go forward in furtherance of a base reuse plan. So it says all public and private activities taken pursuant to or in furtherance of a reuse plan for which an EIR is prepared and certified shall be deemed to be a single project. A subsequent or supplemental EIR shall be required only if the lead agency determines that any of the circumstances that require a subsequent or supplemental EIR exist. And the city staff determined that due to the length of time between the base reuse plan and the time we started this EIR and the things that have changed over time, we thought it was important to do a full subsequent EIR, and also to give the public as much opportunity to review and comment.
Thank you.
So the EIR analyzed a total of 21 environmental issue areas and these environmental issue areas were based on CEQA guidelines Appendix G. And there's a whole list, A to Z, so I'll quickly go through them so you can have an idea of the broad range of topics that were addressed. Aesthetics, air quality, biological and cultural resources, geology and soils, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, noise, population and housing, fire and police protection, school facilities, libraries and public health, parks and recreation, traffic and transportation, wastewater, water, solid waste, and dry utilities. So for all of the project's potential environmental impacts, the EIR looks at short-term construction-related impacts, long-term operational impacts, direct and indirect impacts, and project individual and cumulative impacts. For each of the thresholds that were analyzed, there could be 4 possible answers, and that is no impact, less than significant impact, less than significant impact with mitigation incorporated, and significant and unavoidable impact despite implementation of the mitigation. So beginning with aesthetics, the EIR concluded the project would result in significant unavoidable impacts due to change in visual character. And basically this is a result of the transformation of the site from a wooded to an urban character, and it was based on the removal, as was previously mentioned, of 315 acres of coast live oak woodland. This impact was an individual project impact, was also considered a cumulative impact due to the cumulatively considerable change in character to the former corridor areas. So the conclusion concerning aesthetics took into consideration existing conditions, project design features, and mitigation measures. So for concerning the project's design, the project proposes a higher density development. Is oriented towards the north and the western portions of the site. The impact analysis conservatively assumed that all of the trees within the 315 acres of oak woodland that would be removed when not all of them in actuality would be removed. The specific plan proposes a total of 15% of its area for open space, and that includes parks, paseos, linear parks, as well as community parks. And if the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery were included in this amount, the total amount of open space would increase to 33%. To mitigate the impacts to visual character, the future development would be subject to compliance with a forest management plan, and the forest management plan includes measures to protect trees both during the project's construction phase and then the post-construction operational phases. The forest management plan also requires that the trees be avoided to the maximum extent practical, that they be transplanted when feasible, and also it requires that trees be replaced within the specific plant area at a 1-to-1 ratio. Concerning air quality, the EIR concluded significant unavoidable impact. This was an individual project impact as well as a cumulative impact, and that was due to exceeding adopted thresholds that would impact regional air. To mitigate this impact, the EIR requires that transportation features be implemented, energy efficiency features, water conservation and efficiency features, and solid waste disposal features. So similar to the aesthetic impact, the biological resources analysis concluded a significant and unavoidable impact concerning the loss of 315 acres of coast live oak woodland. Within the 315 acres, a total estimated number of trees was 39,211, and that included 29,937 in Monterey Downs and 9,274 in the Veteran Cemetery area. The EIR also concluded significant and unavoidable impact concerning the loss of landmark tree, and estimated 53 landmark coast live oak trees would be removed. So, sure.
Question, can you go back to that slide?
Okay.
Well, we talked about 39,211 trees. What are we talking about? What size trees, what percentages of trees by size,
I have
and those
that.
sorts of things? Because I keep on hearing, this mandate about that 40,000 old growth trees, and I can't believe that a 6-inch diameter tree is an old growth tree. I'd like to know what the percentages are of the types of trees.
Sure, I have that information, and I have it in total in my area as well. So overall, it's Monterey Downs and the Veteran Cemetery included. There were a total of all of the trees, 28,000 were 6 to 11 inches. And 10,806 were 12 to 23 inches. And 60 were 24 inches or greater.
60?
60.
So we had 28,000.
28,345, 10,806, and 60. The categories were 6 to 11, 12 to 23, and plus 24 inches or greater. In the appendix in the biological resources, there are 2 studies by Forrester that detail the assumptions and the approach and the analysis to come up with these numbers. And he also qualified the trees into 4 categories, that being dead, poor, fair, and good. And in my next slide, I actually talk about the estimated number of trees that, or the conclusion for significant and avoidable impacts. Did take into consideration that as many as 31% or 12,346 trees were dead or in poor condition. So despite that, the EIR conservatively concluded significant and avoidable impact.
And how many were poor, percentage-wise?
Yeah, so dead or poor combined were 31%. I can get you the poor alone. I would take a little bit of digging, but I could definitely find that out for you.
We can do that at the
Sure.
next meeting.
Okay.
So that's a question for future. Okay.
One question. In the mitigation effort, then, would that include, would that pertain to acreage? Would that pertain, and also to just the trees that are in good condition at this point, very good condition?
So there's a mitigation measure that is called the forest management plan that goes, and I will refer you specifically to that.
And I'm talking the 1-to-1 ratio.
Oh, the 1-to-1 ratio is. So yeah, on page 4.3-69 of the EIR's mitigation measure bio-16, impacts to coast live oak woodland. So each of the mitigation measures are geared toward what biological resource they're impacting. So for example, if it's a plant species, then there's mitigation for that. If there's an impact to wildlife species, there's mitigation for that. So in this instance, bio-16 mitigates the impact to coast live oak woodland. And specifically, it says the direct loss of coast live oak woodland habitat cannot be avoided. Therefore, the following measures shall be implemented to reduce identified impacts. Direct loss of coast live oak woodland habitat shall be mitigated at a 1-to-1 compensation ratio. And it goes on to give a series of provisions for implementing the woodland the restoration plan, what the minimum requirements for inclusion in the actual forest management plan are. Just see, one of the milestone for implementation, the performance criteria.
Okay, so specifically the question was, and it was just coming off the mayor's question, as far as condition of the tree, would the 1-to-1 effort not include trees that don't have a chance? If we don't know now, we could, like,
Yeah.
The one-to-one replacement is of the acreage of coast live oak woodland. It's not really on a tree-to-tree basis. It's really about mitigating the loss of the woodland itself, the acreage.
Thank you. Two brief questions, please. The type of forest we're talking about here, I believe it's a coast live oak forest, coast woodland. Isn't it unique since it's actually in a dunes area? I'm under the impression that coastal coast live oak forests are pretty rare. Is this a unique forest?
Our biologist is here. I think he can better answer biological technical questions if allowed.
Okay.
My name is Dan Rossi. Excuse me, my name is Dan Rossi with Michael Baker International. So your question regarding coast live oak woodland?
Can you give us the mic, please?
Closer?
Yeah, speak into the mic.
Okay. Is that better? Coast live oak, Orchis agrifolia, is named coast live oak because it is influenced by the marine influence that, just like coastal sage scrub, in Southern California, it is a coastal influenced habitat type as opposed to moving farther inland. Coast live oak woodland here at Fort Worth is an inland habitat, not necessarily influenced by coastal dune habitat or anything like that. It is actually an inland habitat type.
Are you speaking about generally in Fort Ord, or that this specific forest that's essentially in the dunes?
Coast live oak woodland is found throughout California, throughout the coastal range, throughout Southern California, throughout most of California. You see oak savannas everywhere. It's an inland habitat type.
Coast live oaks, and then some coast live oaks.
So a good example is coastal sage scrub.
Yeah.
Is found within certain elevations from the coast. Certain elevations from the coast that are within the influence of the coastal zone. When you get farther inland, you get more arid environments. Say, for example, in Riverside County, there's River City sage scrub, which is a little bit more xeric or drier than coastal sage scrub. So when you hear the term coast live oak, it doesn't mean that it necessarily lives on the coast, but that it's coastal California as opposed to desert California or mountain California.
Have you ever heard the term, I know it may not be a scientific term, but pygmy oak? Do you know why they're called pygmy oaks?
Is that Channel Islands pygmy oak?
I've seen them in the Los Osos, more Bay Area, but they're probably on the.
Okay, those are, I believe that's like a scrub oak. And we have one down in San Diego called Nuttall scrub oak. And those are found closer to the coast, having that marine influence. Then there is a scrub oak that's found further inland that you wouldn't find that near the coast, and that's a distinguishing geographical distinction between the two. So the one that you're talking about is, very coastally influenced by the marine layer and everything like that. Coast live oak is not necessarily in that condition. It's found in inland, upland habitats. If it's near a drainage, you would call it oak riparian woodland because it's drawing from the water table that the drainage itself provides the hydrology for that.
Okay, I'm trying to focus on the forest at hand, not the inland version that you're talking about. One last question. Forests in general in the state, they're not doing very well right now. There's a lot of death, and right now I forget millions of trees in California are suffering because of the drought and environmental conditions. Is that true?
The drought, there's pine beetles, there's other beetles that are now decimating Southern California. The drought doesn't help that. There's been significant losses from development and agriculture, but most of California has covered by oaks.
That doesn't sound right, but okay, thank you.
I have a question for so what you said was that this forest that we're talking about in this project is inland coastal oak.
Yes, it's a coastal live oak is the name of the tree.
Right, but it's the
And
inland.
it is an inland habitat type that's not necessarily influenced by coastal marine layers.
So I think the original question was it an extra biological significance? Because it's, because of where it is. But if coastal live oak in inland environment is pretty normal in California, then it wouldn't be a special biological resource.
Okay.
I'm trying to understand what the significance of what you said is.
I think what Rita was talking about is 315 acres of coastal live oak woodland is a significant impact in that wood.
Right. And
Because woodlands, coastal live oak woodlands, or resource agencies consider that a sensitive habitat.
This is the habitat. So wait, let me finish this train of thought, because then it goes back to what Rita said about the Port Order Reuse Authority anticipating 1,184 trees being removed, acres of trees being removed in the base reuse plan. And I believe the base reuse plan says there's it's over 5,500 acres of oak woodland in the base reuse plan total. I believe, I could be wrong, because my memory is not as good as it used to be when I was 20. But, so I just wanted to establish what we're talking about. Thank you. Oh, Ms. Ogle, you have a question?
I'm trying to find out what you guys are talking about. But I think where we went, down the rabbit hole was this 300 and so odd acres unique. And as opposed to the remaining acreage that are not going to be touched.
The 315 acres is similar, if not identical, to the rest of the oak woodland throughout Port Order.
And my understanding of that is, we already within the National Monument is protecting over 14,000 acres. And every one of these jurisdictions is required to protect the coastal live oak by definition and by a requirement of having open space. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not unique. It's not like this 350 is different from the rest of the trees.
The 315 acres is similar in almost every way to all of the oaks throughout Fort Ord and the National Monument.
Thank you. So now I'm going to get to,
Ma'am, please limit your comments in the background. Thank you.
my understanding of, I think also, and I think we're all, like trees, so that's not the discussion, right? What we're trying to do is, for me, is to establish the facts of the EIR and discuss the EIR and the impacts. So we're talking about 315 plus acres of removing some of the live oaks and some remaining. Would you consider as an expert, and it's people around that may disagree with you, but as the expert, and if another expert and you guys want to battle, then I'll look at your writings and then I'll take my counsel from that. But right now, you as the expert, would you consider 315 acres a forest? Not, yeah.
Would I consider it a forest?
Yes.
It's technically a woodland.
That's what I want to get to. People talk about it as a forest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is
it
to clarify that, there are riparian scrub, which is made up of like royal willows. You can have a riparian woodland, which has cottonwoods and increases the density of vegetation. You can have alders, sycamores, black willows, and larger trees, then the habitat's now classified as a forest.
Okay, and that's really, you did what I was trying to get you is, the more specific and inquisitive we can get with you, your expertise will tell us, at a certain point, you will lose us because our arguments are general. And I just wanted to make sure that 350 is not a forest. And so I want to move on.
Just to clarify real quick, there are 3 types of oak woodlands that I'm familiar with. There's open oak woodland, and you see that on the inland hills where it's an open savanna, where the oak trees are fairly separated. When the trees are within a certain distance of each other, it then is now classified as a woodland. And then if you have trees that are obviously associated with the drainage, then you have an oak riparian woodland.
Oh, okay, thank you for that. So the trees that's on the national monument, what would you consider still a what,
In the national monument?
Yes.
I've not been in the national monument.
But they would probably be similar to the 315. And so it's a woodland, that's what I'm really trying to, it's not a forest.
The oak woodlands in California are classified the same.
Oh, thank you. That's, I would like to have.
That's a habitat description.
Yeah, and it's the proper one. It's the proper one, but if we're going to talk about it, then we need to use the proper terminology and have the facts. Is it easy, and I'm just going to move on, is it easier for you, we talked about the trees and saving them in groups, right? The diameter of trees, circumference of the trees in different groups. Is it easier? Can you give us the information about like the 11-inch circumference? How old is that tree? Could you get that to us down the road somewhere? Could you find is that too difficult for you to find?
I might have to dig that up, but
yeah, I would like to know that the age of each of those groups at the widest circumference, so we can talk about how long they've been growing there. I think that's important to the discussion. So that I just wanted to add that up. That was my original question, but we went down the road, so I wanted to ask 2 more. So thank you, and I thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions for the biologist? Okay.
I'd like to add one item on the oak woodland. The numbers that we were talking about that from the 1997 base reuse plan have actually been increased by the East Garrison Parker Flats land use modification. That MOU, that modification included an additional 66 acres of oak woodland to remain in habitat.
Okay, does that also include the whispering oaks?
It does not. That would be in addition.
That would be in addition as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, sir.
Okay, so for greenhouse gas emissions, the ER concluded a significant and unavoidable impact because the emissions exceeded a per capita per year GHG emissions thresholds, and similar to air quality, transportation features, energy efficiency features, water conservation and efficiency features, and solid waste disposal features would be implemented in order to mitigate GHG emissions. So this, Mr. Mayor, addresses the question you asked earlier concerning a comparison of the base reuse plan anticipated development with the proposed project. Concerning land use, the EIR did conclude a significant and unavoidable impact for potential conflicts with 2 base reuse policies, specifically
B1 and B2, and those dealt with the water supply issues. So in NEIR, the environmental topical areas are often interconnected. In this EIR, you'll see a lot of overlap concerning land use, groundwater, and water. So as a result of the conclusions in water and groundwater for significant unavoidable impacts, then the project would potentially conflict with these BRP policies. To summarize the land use questions that you had, the project proposed 1,280 dwelling units and 832,801 square feet of non-residential land uses. In contrast, the base reuse plan proposed or anticipated development for 1,559 dwelling units and 2.8 million square feet of non-residential land uses. The base reuse plan update anticipated 2,248 dwelling units and 3.1 million square feet of non-residential land uses. So comparatively, the project compared to the base reuse plan proposes at least 18% fewer dwelling units and at least 71% less non-residential development than what was anticipated by the base reuse plan.
So the base reuse plan looked at those numbers cumulatively for all projects on the base, correct?
So the numbers that are being compared here are based on the same geographical area that the project is. It isn't
So
based.
site-specific.
Yes.
That's good to know. Thank you.
I know you don't have this this evening, but I would like to know, because we're talking about maybe the potential of having the project go forward. And as you say, it's going to be 18% less dwelling units. I would like to know with our Seaside, with our requirement of 20% affordable housing, how much affordable housing we're losing by, first of all, the reduction of the anticipation of this project. And I guess that would be the same number if this project doesn't go forward, the potential for affordable housing. And I guess 71% less residential development.
Non-residential.
Yeah, that would just be, I understand that not as many 2 or 3 story buildings or not buildings at all. That means more open space. If you're doing less non-residential development, by definition, that would be more open space.
Right, in one of the earlier slides, the project actually, the specific plan proposes 105 acres to be designated for open space uses. That would include community parks, linear parks, trails, and that would increase to 33% if the veteran cemetery is included.
Right.
So yeah, so the inverse is true. If your development increases, then the potential for open space decreases, and then vice versa.
But my point is, the base reuse plan said we could have had 3.1 million square feet of non-residential, and this is only proposed 800,000 roughly.
That's right.
Okay.
So that brings up the question, can we have the number of, or the percentage of increase in open space with this plan?
So comparison of the open space that was anticipated in the base reuse plan. Actually, there are 2 tables in the EIR, specifically in the land use section, and they outline the anticipated uses for the base reuse plan and the base reuse plan update.
Well, I mean, you can bring that number back to us. And the other thing I want to talk about is the water. Concerning the sufficient water supply, significant and unavoidable despite mitigation. That's already been stated in the base reuse plan EIR.
Well, this conclusion of significant unavoidable is really based on, three factors. One is that, there's insufficient water supplies for phases 4 through 6 of the project. In addition, there's uncertainty regarding future water supplies, namely, desalinated water and, recycled water. So the basis for this conclusion are those three things primarily.
Okay, what does the base reuse plan EIR remain silent on that?
On water supply church, I don't know that it anticipated a water supply.
So the development of reuse of the corridor is allowed 6,600 acre feet of groundwater per year. That was determined on a court settlement between Flora and the Sierra Club. So the bottom line is there's 6,600 acre feet of groundwater available on Florida Ward.
Unless there's augmentation.
Well, the augmentation would be recycled water, desal, or some other, but it would not be Salinas Valley groundwater. So, as Rita said, currently there's only enough Salinas Valley groundwater for a portion of that 6,600 acre feet that could be designated for this project. Development beyond that would need to wait until supplemental water supplies are identified.
Right, and state law prohibits the city from entitling the project unless they conclude they provide the water. Correct.
Mr. Mayor, in order also to expand on page 4.19-16 of the EIR, that's the water section. There's a summary of the long-term water supply analysis from the base reuse plan, and it says that the base reuse plan build-out would require a new local water source and supply system. The BRP PIR identified 4 potential sources, including importing water from Monterey County, importing water from Salinas Valley, desalinization, and on-site storage. The BRP concludes that since a number of reasonable long-term water supply options exist, impacts would be less than significant following adherence to BRP policies and programs. We conversely concluded significant and unavoidable because of the uncertainty associated with desalinization and the recycled water availability and the infrastructure. There's actually a couple of slides that address water.
Yeah, and I think probably some of the things that weren't factored in is the Pure Water Monterey project, which is actually providing about 600 acre feet to Marina Coast Water, augmenting their water as potable water. There's also plans for stormwater collection and cleaning. So that doesn't even talk about recycled water projects that may come online. And there's one that's coming online in 2018. So we might look at that a little bit closer because the water supply issues are important. But so long as we understand as phases go along, if there's not the adequate water, then we can't authorize those projects.
So the EIR recommends a mitigation measure that requires that with each development, there be provided proof that adequate water supply is available to serve the proposed land uses.
Right.
In addition, there are infrastructure plans and permits required for potable water and recycled water to ensure that the proposed land uses are adequately served.
And retention ponds for collection of stormwater.
The stormwater drainage approach that the specific plan takes is to, it's a no net increase so that all of the surface water is retained on site, and the approach is that each of the kind of drainage areas have their own basins to store the water.
Which could inversely be used for landscaping, irrigation, whatever.
I don't know.
Well, I'm just thinking outside the box.
Right, but more likely what you mentioned just a minute ago is that it would recharge the groundwater basin.
All right. Any other questions?
As I was reading this, I was wondering if this is factored in considering the greenhouse gas emissions. the major concern with that is carbon dioxide. Our mitigation effort is where we would want it to be, as far as replanting and all that. Would that be as big of a unavoidable factor then? This tree will be taking carbon dioxide out of it.
Okay, so I think that maybe what you're alluding to is the sequestration or the loss of that's occurring as a result of the trees. There is a detailed discussion concerning sequestration in the master responses. And we actually estimate the loss of sequestration that's resulting from removal of the 315 acres. If I might, I'm sorry, I'll just take 1 second. Okay, yeah, so in the final EIR, there's a specific master response that addresses what you're looking to, I believe, which is, a lot of the public submitted questions or concerns regarding that loss occurring as a result of 315 acres of coastal live woodland being removed. And it's the potential loss of carbon sequestration, and you're right, so it's the carbon dioxide that is stored that is considered to improve greenhouse of the global warming. So that's why it's an issue that, so the loss of those trees results in that being forfeited. So what we do is we estimate the loss, the sequestration, excuse me, not only from the loss of the coastal oak woodland, but the loss and removal of all the vegetation within the development footprint. And the removal of 315 acres of coastside oak woodland and 254 acres of other vegetation results in a loss of 37,620 metric, I forgot what this MTCO, the carbon equivalents. We have over a 20-year period, but again, and I think similar to the discussion that we had concerning the biological impact is that not all of the trees within the 315 acres would be removed because there is open space proposed throughout the area. There is a mitigation that requires that the coast live oak woodland would be replaced at a 1-to-1 ratio. In addition, I know that there's a thought that there's actually no net loss because in carbon stock, because when the trees die and decompose, at that time they actually release everything. So it's a neutral impact.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
So again, something that I mentioned earlier, there is overlap in a couple of the environmental issues, namely hydrology and water quality, which addresses the threshold concerning groundwater supplies. And in this instance, so the project has created demand for 852 acre-feet yearly of groundwater, and as a result of there being uncertainty concerning future water supplies, and as a result of there being insufficient water for phases 4 through 6 of the project, the EIR concludes significant and unavoidable impacts. And again, the future development would require a water service agreement to mitigate this impact, and that involves providing proof of adequate water supply for all of the proposed land uses. And so to put groundwater in a bit more into context, so basin-wide, that is the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, basin-wide, that means all of the withdrawals are 500,000 acre-feet yearly. So the Marina Coast Water District alone withdrawals 4,670 acre-feet yearly, which actually represents less than 1% of all of the withdrawals in the basin. So it's not a significant amount. And just some recent data as of December 31st. So the 6,600 acre-feet yearly that is allocated to the Ord community that Terry mentioned earlier, of that amount, Marina Coast Water District, as of December 31st, 2015, actually consumed only 25% of it, which is 1,650 acre-feet yearly. And then similarly, the city, of the amount that was allocated to the city, 1,012 acre-feet yearly, the city only consumed 50%, or 505.23 acre-feet. So of the amount that's allocated, what's actually being consumed as of the end of 2015 is a significantly less amount.
So, when we say the project water demand of 852.5 acre-feet per year, is that based on, and there's insufficient groundwater, is that based on Seaside allocation or the total allocation of the 660?
So the 852 acre-feet refers to the demand that's created by the project. The allocations refer to supply. So it's two different factors, but I have a slide that shows the math on that.
So the insufficiency is based on the allocation, or is it based on?
That is correct.
Okay,
It's
so
based on what is actually allocated. If you'd like, yeah, let me just
Okay,
go ahead
go on,
and I have a slide that shows the math. I might as well talk about water supplies now. So similar to groundwater, because in this community, groundwater is the source of water for the community. The EIR includes a significant and unavoidable impact, again, because phases 4 through 6, there's not sufficient supply to meet those, the demand associated with those phases, and the uncertainties regarding the desalinated water and the recycled water. So to minimize these impacts, every future development, there's a water service agreement, and that is required to provide proof of an adequate water supply to serve the proposed uses. In addition, to ensure that there is infrastructure to serve the demand, there are water improvement plans and permits that are required, and recycled water improvement plans and permits that are required. So a little bit, just to show a little bit of the math that we've been talking about. So going back to kind of the top of the food chain, is that 6,600 acre-feet yearly were allocated to the Ord communities. Of that amount, 1,722 acre-feet yearly were allocated to the city plus the county. Of that amount, the city and the county have already sub-allocated 1,309.1 acre-feet yearly. So what is available for future allocations, or what is not been, what is identified as unallocated, is 412.9 acre-feet yearly. So then what we do is we use that 412.9 acre-feet and compare that to the demand that's created by the project. The project's demand for all development, for all phases, is 852.5 acre-feet. Only 412.9 remain that have not been allocated, so there is a shortage. There's an unmet demand of 439.6. So as a result, we concluded significant and avoidable. And based on the amount that's still unallocated, 412.9, and the demand that that phases 1 through 3 total, which is 396.3. So there is sufficient supply to meet the demands for phases 1 through 3. So the impact conclusion is based on the shortage of water for phases 4 through 6.
Right, and in your mitigation measures, we talked about the 4 categories of types of water that we could use for augmentation. There's one that we haven't talked about, and that is the Army and CSUMB are not using very much of their water. So it's very possible the city could enter into MOUs with those entities for drawing on their water and supplanting that with a future water project.
That's correct. And there could be other areas where water could be drawn from allocated water could be drawn from. For example, the city, in theory, allocated water to Main Gate specific plan, which, as we know, at this time, there's no developer. It's certainly within the council's purview to allocate that water to this project or any other project they see fit, or to continue to reserve it for the Main Gate specific plan.
So it's actually an open door that there's a lot of options.
Yes.
Yes.
I will have a lot of questions on water, but this is but right now, so Seaside can move its allocations around as we see fit. That's interesting. We can negotiate with the developer over our allocations and say, we'll provide you these allocations. I noticed in one of the responses to one of the letters in the EIR, it suggested that county water was kind of equivalent to Seaside water, as in none of it has been allocated to the project. Is that, are we equating the county water and Seaside water in some way?
Well, you're correct in stating that no water has been allocated to this project. County water has not been allocated, city water has not been allocated. In order for, the city has total control over the water that for a Marine Coast Water District have allocated to the city. They've also allocated water to the county. Because a portion of this project, a good portion of this project is located in the county, there have been discussions, and EIR included an analysis that if the county allocated water to this project, this is what the impact would be. And one of the things that we spoke a little bit about earlier, at least in my presentation after the EIR, we talk about the remaining actions that need to occur in order for this project to move forward if it's approved. And one of those is a pre-sphere of influence agreement between the city and the county. And that looks at the disposition of land, allocation of water, and some other things. So
we're talking about the EIR right now, right?
We're talking about an agreement between the city and the county that would need to occur in order for the county to allocate water. So no water has been allocated because the EIR needed to be completed first. And the allocation of water comes when the decision makers allocate water. So there could not be an agreement between the city and the county for the county to allocate water to this project until EIR was complete. And so, again, if the city council approves the specific plan, in the future, staff will be bringing back to you several things. One of them would be a draft agreement between the city and the county for the disposition of land and allocation of water. If the city council approves that, then we take it to the Monterey County Board of Supervisors, and they would have to approve it also.
So it seems like there's a pretty big assumption here that by these numbers that the county will allocate the water to this project. Is that?
That was an assumption in the EIR. The EIR is full of assumptions by nature. The EIRs assume a project's going to be approved. Otherwise, there would be no impact to evaluate.
Right, and the standard for water in an EIR is that they show you water isn't available, or what is the standard? Because I've been hearing all these hypotheticals. What is the standard requirement for?
Well, I think one of the things is that initially this project was being processed in both the city and the county. So the city and the county were going to process it jointly, prepare the EIR jointly, and then have some agreements about several things. The city would allocate a portion of their water to the portion that's in the city, and the county would allocate a portion of their water to the portion that's currently in unincorporated county. If the city is going to annex that land, then the county wouldn't need the water that was otherwise assumed for that property. because the property is a development parcel in the base reuse plan. And so development of this property has always been assumed since the base reuse plan was developed.
So the county has no other property that it would be interested in developing with that water, is that what you're saying?
There could be some other properties. The main properties were this one and Whispering Oaks. And Whispering Oaks is, as I understand, is no longer on the table. There might be some other small projects that they do want to allocate water to. Again, the county hasn't agreed to allocate this water.
Okay.
They can't agree to that or even consider it until we finish the EIR process, which we did. And the city, there'd be no reason for the county to take action if the city doesn't approve it.
Okay.
Approve the allocation.
So the first step is certifying the EIR, and part of certifying the EIR is determining if there's enough water available for the project. Is that?
Well, it's been determined that there is not enough water for the project, even if the city allocates all of their unallocated water, and if the county allocates all of their unallocated water. There's only enough for the first 3 phases.
Okay, so we don't rise to that threshold that CEQA requires of showing water for a project.
Yeah, CEQA requires identifying the water that's available, and if there isn't water available, what are some reasonable ways to make water available? And the EIR does discuss the other options for water, which is, as Rita said, recycle and desal and any other option that the Marine Coast Water District could come up with.
If I may just add one more thing, so to take it one step up, the amount that is allocated to the county is allocated for the county within the Ford community. So the county couldn't allocate that water for use to a project outside of the Ford community. It starts from what is allocated, again, with the 6,600 and then worked its way, acre feet yearly, then worked its way down from there. So the county could reallocate that to another project, but it would have to be within the Ford community.
Okay, so for just clarification's sake, it'd be nice to know if you could let us know what other potential properties the county might use this water for. Thank you.
Through the chair, I have no problems with that, but I'm trying to understand. That could be anything. And so when would they stop listing stuff? And then I think they would have to ask the county, and then what would be appropriate, what would be appropriate. You know, what I don't think we should be doing is getting away from the EIR. And then definitely saying what the county would do and what they shouldn't, what they will and what they won't do. Like you said, the assumption was that maybe they would. Otherwise, why go through this process? If you guys don't know the answer, then you don't know the answer. But we shouldn't assume what the county would do or won't do, because the next thing we're going to hear about it is we're making those assumptions. So let me just finish. So my understanding is this is just a snapshot in time. So right now, you guys as the professionals could not consider water that is not there. I think everybody at this table and on the peninsula is working at the 3-project water portfolio to supplement water on the peninsula. Marine Coast Water is working on desal and other things, but because that is not, the professional in CEQA, analysis, you cannot use that information in your analysis. Is that correct? You cannot take such a leap of faith that it would be completed.
Well, we consider it, and we have a discussion concerning desalination and provided other alternative water supplies discussions in the EIR, but conservatively, because of the uncertainty associated with desal, we conclude it's insufficient.
And what's the uncertainty?
There's uncertainty concerning approval. Usually a desal project is out, 20 years.
Okay, okay, and that's fine, that's the point, that's your responsibility, and that's what I'm saying, you guys are doing fair, independent analysis to this process. But the base reuse plan says that they believe water will be there. Isn't that what you said?
Yes.
Right, okay, because they know stuff that you guys cannot take into consideration, which is, some heavy lifting by the cities and the water districts and others that has to come up with that water. That's their responsibility. I'm just saying, what you were doing is a snapshot. So when you say, there's no water at this time, doesn't mean there won't be any water. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, because people are going to say, because you said there's no water, 5 years from now, there still won't be any water. That's not what you're saying, is it?
It's based on the water that's allocated
As of right now,
as of right now.
a snapshot.
Yes.
Okay. And then you talked about the parcel that this project is supposed to be on. That parcel was designated for reuse from day one, is that my understanding? Is it designated for reuse?
Yes, since the base reuse plan was adopted in 1997.
And presumably it had trees on it when they turned it over, is that correct? Some trees.
It did have trees on it in
They're a little
1997.
older now, but a little larger now.
There's some new ones, and some have died, and some are bigger.
And then that same parcel has water allocated for its reuse on that parcel. The county, is that correct?
I don't believe they're allocated by parcel, but in allocating, you're correct.
Well, I guess
They
I'm
look
asking,
at the land use designations for those parcels that are designated for development to determine how much should be allocated to each jurisdiction.
but for the county to have designated this as a reuse parcel, that means they allocated some water to be used on that parcel. They can change their mind, but my point is, in the calculation of water use, they designated some to be used on this parcel.
I think you could assume that the Corridor Reuse Authority, when they designated this a development parcel, that some of that 6,600 acre feet would be allocated to this parcel at some point.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing I wanted to add to the discussion was getting back into the history of the project, that prior to the applicants requesting annexation of the entire site to the city, they did have an exclusive negotiating agreement, that might have been called something different, with the county for development of this project that's in the county. So the county was at some point entertaining considering a project on this site, until the city received the applications for annexation.
And you as the project manager haven't heard anything from the county disputing that assumption that they're taking back their cooperation in looking at developing this parcel.
Seaside City staff and county staff have been discussing this agreement that I was referring to, and I'll be speaking more about later. That's called a pre-spirit influence agreement that LAFCO requires between the city and the county before LAFCO considers any action that they need to take. And one of the things that we've talked about is the allocation of water.
And I'm not trying to, again, assume for the county, because they can change their mind anytime they want. I'm just saying, we're within, you guys and the cities within our sphere of influence, for lack of a better word, to continue on with this process, assuming that the county is in agreement with it, because they're currently discussing using this parcel with us.
That's correct. And just to clarify, it's just been discussed at a staff level, and the board of supervisors could vote differently, just like.
No, I said that. But my point is, if they wanted to change it, then they would have changed it. They can change it tomorrow, but right now, I'm saying we're not doing anything wrong by moving forward. Okay.
Question, didn't the county sent a letter in response to the draft SEIR, specifically noting that we were counting their allocations when there was no agreement. They were making an actual note of the fact that we were counting their water when there is no agreement. So I don't want to.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. And they were just clarifying that there was no agreement.
Yes. So we could not count on their water. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next.
Just a little bit more. So concerning traffic and transportation, the EIR did conclude a significant and unavoidable impact at various facilities because of a decrease in the level of service, and also concerning congestion management plan facilities. So under the existing with project conditions, 4 study intersections, 3 State Route 1 mainline segments, and 8, I can't read that, I'm sorry, 8 State Route 1 on-ramps would be significantly impacted. Under the interim year of 2018 with East Side Parkway with project condition, 7 study intersections would be significantly impacted, and under cumulative with project conditions, 4 study intersections, 15 State Route 1 mainline segments, and 21 State Route 1 on-ramps would be significantly impacted. To mitigate these impacts, improvements are required at multiple facilities and at multiple locations. Concerning 4 of facilities, applicants would be required to pay for impact fees. And concerning the other facilities or non-4 facilities, applicants would be required to either construct the improvement or pay their fair share of the cost for implementing that improvement. Specifically concerning the events at the arena, we do have a mitigation that requires annual special events traffic and emergency services management plan that it's to be prepared on an annual basis, and it would specifically address beforehand all of the known events, the times, the types of events, the type of emergency personnel that would be required, the type of traffic control measures that would be required. So that's on an annual basis a requirement. Water supplies we've already addressed. And then, so in addition to all those environmental issue areas that EIR, as required by CEQA, does address a range of alternatives, and 5 alternatives in addition. It identifies alternatives that were considered but rejected. For the 5 alternatives that were analyzed in the EIR, there's an analysis that compares the impacts that are anticipated to occur with that alternative to the impacts that are forecast to occur with the project. So the 5 alternatives that were addressed were the no project, no development, and that alternative assumes the project site would remain in its current condition, that nothing would happen on the project site. For the no project existing land use designations alternative, that assumes that development on the property would proceed according to what the base reuse plan anticipated would occur on the property. For the reduced density alternative, that alternative assumes 50% fewer dwelling units and 61% less non-residential square footage. For the modified project alternative, it's assumed that 138 more dwelling units would be developed and 91% less non-residential square footage. Additionally, an alternative site alternative was evaluated, that was the Seaside East property, and that analysis assumed an equal number of dwelling units as a project and 27% less non-residential development. So in addition to the alternatives, there were various alternative properties or sites that were considered but rejected. There are 7 total identified, and those are properties that were previously developed and or previously disturbed in the cities of Seaside and Marina. And for all those 7 properties, there were none that were contiguous or that were comparable in size to the project. And there was one, the largest, which was 143 acres. That the previous use of that property was for a landfill, and the land use designation for that property was habitat management. So it really was not intended for future use or development, and as a result of the 7 properties that were considered were rejected for further analysis as alternatives. So with that, glad to answer any more questions, but I think Terry has part of her presentation.
Just one little question. Back to the traffic. I thought I heard or read or someone shared the idea that Caltrans and the staff of the city work in total agreement as it relates to mitigating circumstances. Is that true? And can you explain a little bit about that?
So yes, there was a later comment letter received from Caltrans that addressed thresholds that were assumed in our analysis, and Bob Davis, who is our traffic engineer, I think I will defer to him. We've done some research and we've actually prepared responses to Caltrans letters, and we have that information ready for you tonight.
Thank you.
Bob Davis, Senior Transportation Planner.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Hello.
You just have to go close to the microphone. I don't do the audio for the microphone. The microphone's out there. Just have to go close.
All right. Yes, I'd like, regarding the comment from Caltrans, basically, it's a statewide policy that they have to maintain level service, what they call C/D. And it's interesting because I think that the intent that Caltrans has throughout the state is to try to maintain level service C where they can. If you ask different districts throughout the state, the LA region, San Diego, each one has its own interpretation of what that level service is. Most jurisdictions will say are acceptable level service C or D. Theirs is somewhere in between. It's really not clear. The bottom line is the regional transportation plan that was prepared for this area. Originally, I think back in 2000, I want to say 2006, 2007, the old plan tried to set a threshold at level service C, and that was the goal. Because of the lack of funds throughout the state, being able to approve regional highways, most of the highways have deteriorated in terms of their level service down to D, and sometimes E, and in some cases even F. So when the new RTP was developed in 2010, they took that into account. They said, we need to try to set a reasonable goal. And so the goal that's in the RTP for Monterey County actually says that the threshold is level service D to try to maintain it. For any new roads that are built, the design level service will be C. But wherever you can, maintain level service D. So that implies that anything beyond D is unacceptable, to be either E or F. And that's what we've used in the EIR. So the fact that it was mentioned that didn't meet the criteria, I think it's a little bit, probably a little bit misleading, because there must have been coordination with Caltrans. They developed a regional transportation plan, and that's calling level service D as the acceptable threshold, that they would see that would be appropriate for State Route 1.
Kind of going along with that, I think you said, or someone said, that you're writing a letter to them in response.
We did.
Is the plan to get together on the same page to make, it's a goal, to get on the same page with them to make this a win-win, agreement that we're working together, because obviously Caltrans is part of the, important part of this whole process in all roads.
We did respond, and the response that we got back was that it wasn't real clear whether they dropped the issue or whether they still maintain that it should be C. The bottom line is that most of, there are many sections of State Route 1 today, they're at level service D. And so those are, I guess, would be considered already failing. So if you add one more trip to it, it's considered an unavoidable impact, if that's the case.
So I assume that if we don't understand, I'm maybe mishearing, so I apologize. So we don't know what they said or understand what direction they're coming from. We're just gonna leave it, go away and hope everything works. Is that the plan, or?
No, I don't think that's not the plan. At this point, they've accepted our response and haven't come back and said that it has to be level service.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Come back to Rita here. I'm going to go back to the replantation and mitigation effort. And I was wondering where the 1-to-1 ratio came from.
I know they came from the biological technical report, which was prepared by biologists, but the reasoning behind it, I think I would have to do a little bit of research. I don't know if that's a typical standard for. Oh, okay. Possibly from the base reuse plan. I think we're going to need a little bit of research to figure out the source of that threshold, or that, excuse me, that ratio.
Thank you. And in the research, could you check and see if that can be increased to therefore further mitigate the greenhouse gases?
So I'll go back to the traffic. Ms. Whistler said that I think that we received a late letter from Caltrans.
So Caltrans sent the city a comment letter on the draft EIR. The draft EIR, the letter and the response to that letter were included in the final EIR. And when the final EIR was published, we sent out notices to all agencies and other people that commented, letting them know that it was available and how they could find it on the website. And the letter that we've been talking about is a letter that Caltrans sent after they received the final EIR and reviewed the EIR's response to their comment on the draft EIR.
Okay, so the second letter was timely, wasn't actually, it was just kind of late in the timeline, but it wasn't late as in too late or anything.
No, they were commenting on the final EIR, on our response to their comment. And then we contacted them and gave them the response that we and our team put together in response to their comment, and then they sent us another letter or email indicating, thanking us for the clarification and that they had no further comments.
Right. No further comments. They didn't say okay.
Correct.
So they sent a letter. They originally sent a letter when the draft EIR was out. Basically, I didn't read the two letters side by side, but they had concerns with the traffic analysis.
Yeah, as was just explained, had a concern on the level of service threshold that was being used. D was being used as opposed to what they thought should be used was CD.
And that was on the draft EIR.
Correct.
Yeah. And then, so instead of listening to their letter and making changes, when in other places you made the changes were made in the EIR, you just explained why you did what you did instead of following their recommendation, their concerns.
Yeah, I think as Bob explained, the response to their comment on the draft EIR explained why they used level of service D, because that was what was directed by TAMC.
Right, so basically they said, change this. The response was, no, this is why we did it. And then their letter back was, you didn't change it. Basically they said, I think one of the lines was, it underestimates the amount of traffic. Is that? I don't have it in front of me, but
Right, the amount of traffic was not underestimated.
according to Caltrans,
According to Caltrans, who used a different level of service standard. But they didn't question the trip generation.
Yeah.
We're talking about the level of service.
Right. Okay. So basically, it sounds like it's a flawed traffic analysis according to Caltrans, and none of us, I don't think any of us here are experts on traffic analysis, but Caltrans, the state agency that probably should know traffic, says it's flawed. Doesn't that open us up to potential valid litigation in the future if we certify this, knowing that Caltrans sent not one, but 2 letters saying it was a flawed analysis?
Yeah, let me interject right here. I've been sitting on the TAMC board since 2000, and I've gone through several iterations of the regional traffic plan, transportation plan for Monterey County and region. And Caltrans is at the table the whole time, as well as AMBAG and other interested agencies. And the level of service fluctuates with the area. The fact that District 5 headquarters has an issue, I don't know if it was District 5, we got it from or it was from Caltrans Central, that sent the letter, but they don't always talk to each other. Like, yeah, big Caltrans and small Caltrans. And I know that the folks here in the Monterey County, the District 5, are very aware of the levels of service on our main regional roads. And for the most part, they are D and just a little bit towards C. So I don't think there's a flawed analysis.
No, I think you're absolutely right. There's no way that the county could have gone through the transportation and the regional transportation plan process without being at the table with Caltrans, without them agreeing to what they were planning for. It just doesn't happen in a vacuum. So clearly there's some kind of miscommunication going on between the people that are doing the regional planning and the person that was probably commenting on the report. In terms of the analysis being flawed, that's not the case at all. All we're talking about here is whether or not a trip added to a road is going to be considered an impact at level of service D or at level of service E. That's the only difference. And so the list of impacts could potentially change if we went one way versus the other. But it won't change the analysis per se in terms of the technical part. It's just how the result is determined.
Okay, well, we saw 2 letters on the record from Caltrans, obviously not coming or agreeing with what you're saying. So that's a significant concern, should be for anyone, and I think it should be revisited and see how Caltrans thinks we should resolve this, and we should consider using the formulas they recommend. I think we really should to make this EIR accurate and stand up. One last question. Apparently Fora found that AMBAG's traffic model, have you been using AMBAG's traffic models? Yeah. Apparently Fora recently found that AMBAG's traffic model had a flaw, and this is just very recent. How does this realization that it had a flaw and the corrections affect the traffic studies that you performed.
Not aware of the flaw.
Yeah, not a word.
Okay, would like, please look into that and answer that. Apparently it was in for an executive meeting.
I think we're all concerned, well, I'm not concerned about the traffic impact too, so those are definitely good questions. But it was said that there, there wasn't a traffic expert in the room, and there really is. And so I would like for him to come back up again so I can ask him a question. I mean, that's what we're paying him to be the traffic expert, right? So what I want to get to is, I read the letter from Caltrans, and they said they had some issues with what the analysis was. You, as a group, wrote them back and said, well, we're using a different analysis, a different formula, and what did they do after that? When you told them, well, we're looking at it like this, the region is a traffic level D, and what did they do after that?
Well, no, we explained the various reasons that we used it because of all the regional plans that are in the area that in fact use that same level service as the CN.
And so I want to know, what did they do? You sent them the letter, what did they do after that?
Well, they didn't say specific, they just said, well, our standard is level service C/D.
And that was their response. If they wanted to say, what you're doing still doesn't meet the standard, then they clearly could have said that.
Right.
And they know they have the authority to have said that. They didn't say that.
They didn't say that.
And so this is not the first time this has happened to you as an expert. I'm sure you travel up and down state or the region. Is that normal for them to leave you with that type of statement and the project continues on, whether it's just a road? My point is, it would be unnormal for you to go back to them and say, are you sure you want us to continue because you were vague in your last letter? Is that you guys don't normally do that, do you?
No, but if they really have a problem with it, they'll come back and say, they'll come back again and say that we want the level service standard changed. Each, like I said before, each district.
No, I understand all that. That's, I want the public to hear that if they had issues with it, they would write you guys another letter and clearly tell you that they had a clear problem with what you're doing.
Right.
Okay, and we haven't received that yet.
All we received was an email that basically said, we received your comments. I can't remember exactly how it was.
My point is, I think if we receive a letter that says we have a problem with what you're doing, you guys are required to share that with us and the public.
Yes, so this was in your package, and I'd be happy to read the text of that email.
It doesn't say what you're doing is wrong, stop.
No.
And if they wanted you to stop, they would clearly have said that. Mayor, all I'm saying is I think Caltrans understands that they thought we were doing something wrong. They would not hesitate to say that. If, we don't have I don't think we're in a position to bully them into telling us not to do something. They wanted us not to do something. So, maybe I'm confused, but.
I think basically the issue is that Caltrans can't arbitrarily say that it's going to be C, because it's been instituted in the plans of regional transportation plan that goes through a process. So if they wanted a remedy for that situation, they would have to go through the process. Correct?
That's what I believe. I think that, again, Caltrans is a very large organization, agency, and they have to deal with highways throughout the state. They deal with highways in rural areas and in urban areas. Depending on where you are, there's a realistic level of service versus an urban level service of D versus a rural level service of C. And that's why the wording is the way it is, so that each district can interpret that according to their needs and their abilities to maintain traffic at a certain level of service.
Any other comments or questions on that?
Yeah, maybe, if Caltrans is interested in discussing further what their opinion is, maybe we could bring them at the next meeting and they can explain it clearly themselves. But we did get two pretty clear letters from them, and perhaps we need a representative here to either say it again or say this time it makes sense. But I think it'd be best if we not proceed without knowing the answer to this significant impact.
Yes, I mean, as the city's representative to AMBAG, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't address what was mentioned before, and this came up at the last AMBAG meeting just a few weeks ago. I'm not sure it's a flaw necessarily, because AMBAG represents the tri-county area, all the Monterey Bay area governments, and it was with FLOR was maybe an information oversight. So I think saying a flaw is undermining the methods in which they gather information. I'm not sure that was it.
Okay, so, do you have one more slide or two?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, that was it. I'm just available, teams here for any questions you may have.
Okay, well, if, I think we probably asked all the questions we wanted to ask. Carrie?
Okay, I have just a few more slides to wrap up staff's presentation.
Okay, I need to take a break.
Okay. This is
Can we take 5 minutes? Can we take 5 minutes? Thank you. Okay, everybody, please take your seats. We're getting ready to start. Okay, thank you. Let's reconvene. Terry, you were getting ready to
Finish up this presentation.
please.
Okay, so we just had a presentation from Rita on the EIR, and this is a little bit about EIR certification that you'll have on your agenda at your next meeting on October 13th to consider whether or not to certify the EIR. You do need to certify the EIR prior to approving the project, or in theory, prior to taking action on the project. You need to adopt findings pursuant to the California Environmental Quality Act, adopt a mitigation monitoring program, and adopt a statement of overriding considerations. So let's talk a little bit about the statement of overriding considerations. Again, if you decide to approve the project, the California Environmental Quality Act requires you to adopt a statement of overriding considerations, finding that the benefits of the project outweigh the significant environmental impacts. And in your next package, staff will provide you a set of possible benefits for you to consider if you're going to take that action. And so here's a draft preliminary statement or some benefits that you could consider. And that is that the provision of land sale revenue to the city for approximately 450 acres of land. And what this means is that if the project's approved and the city obtains the land from FORA and the county, the city would then sell it to the developer and receive the proceeds from the sale. Provision of revenue to the city associated with increased population and retail and other tax generating uses. Provision of jobs and housing and jobs to assist the city in reaching their jobs housing balance. Provision of high density residential and residential commercial mixed use projects. Provision of a variety of housing type sizes and prices to increase housing choice. The provision of housing affordable to very low and moderate income households. Provision of large-scale commercial recreational facilities. Provision of a trail system and 2 staging areas to the Fort Ord Recreational Habitat Area, which leads to the Fort Ord National Monument. Provision of parks and recreational facilities for Seaside residents. The project would utilize vacant and underutilized parcels consistent with the reuse plan to support mixed uses, including commercial facilities. Provision of opportunities to highlight cultural events and attractions in Seaside to help project a high quality of life image to potential visitors and business prospects. Provision of new jobs assisting the region with replacing the approximately 21,000 jobs that were lost when Fort Ord closed. Provision of a project that's consistent with the Fort Ord reuse plan and the Fort Ord Habitat Management Plan, which includes preservation of the 73-acre Oak Oval. A provision of mixed uses close to CSU and B. Provision of forward impact fees. Provides an opportunity for the city to fulfill its obligation in the endowment parcel MOU. And provides a walkable mixed-use community that incorporates principles of long-term environmental sustainability and resource conservation. So the next step for the City Council is the October 13th meeting, and all of the study items that were on the agenda tonight will be before you to consider. And those items are: consider adopting a resolution certifying the EIR, making findings pursuant to CEQA, adopting a statement of overriding considerations, adopting a mitigation monitoring program. The second one would be to consider adopting a resolution approving the general plan amendment. And the last two would be approved using an ordinance. So the first one is to consider an ordinance adopting a specific plan. And the second one is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance. And both of those, if approved on October 13th, would require a second reading that would be scheduled for October 20th. City Council future consideration. So assuming, if we assume that the approvals are made on the 13th and the 20th, there are several other actions that we need to come before you. And those are the sphere of influence amendment. This is the one that I discussed a little bit earlier that requires the city to have an agreement with the County of Monterey regarding land disposition and water allocation. And again, that's a requirement of LAFCO, and also just is a good agreement between the city and the county about the issues that would be in the agreement. Annexation and pre-zoning of the property to be annexed to the city, and that LAFCO requires a tax sharing agreement with the County of Monterey. Disposition and development agreement with the developer, with the applicant, and a master tentative map and a vesting tentative map. And then there are actions that are required by other agencies. And the first is the Forward Reuse Authority. It's required to determine whether project in furtherance of the base reuse plan is actually consistent with the base reuse plan. And then we would go to the County of Monterey to review and consider approving the pre-sphere of influence agreement and tax sharing agreement. And then we would need to go to LAFCO for them to consider reviewing and approving the sphere of influence amendment and annexation applications. So after all of the approvals occur, there's still actually implementation of the specific plan. So first, the property would need to be transferred to the city, and the city would sell all of the non-public property to the developer. And then the developers still need to go through the application review process with the city. So whenever they wanted to start building something, they need to submit the appropriate application, and it would have to go through the proper process. Any further questions?
Any questions?
Thank you, Mayor. You started with the idea that certifying the EIR, that's not our only option, is it? For the next meeting?
There are 4 actions that you would be considering. One would be certifying the EIR or not certifying the EIR.
Or not certifying.
Yeah, these are all considerations. And then adopting a resolution approving the general plan amendment, and then an ordinance adopting a specific plan, and an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance. Those are the items that would be before you for you to consider and deliberate and make some decisions about.
We have a normally scheduled meeting on the 6th, I think. Why wouldn't we be doing this on the 6th?
Because I don't think we're ready to get there by the 6th. We still have a packet to prepare and lots of questions to answer.
Okay.
Right?
And then why not a regular meeting on the 20th then? Is there some sense of urgency? I'm not, just, why not a regular?
Well,
I might be able to help as well. In addition to all the preparation, the city has, for this project, the city has other business to conduct. And one of the things we're trying to do with this sequencing is allow ample discussion on this topic without it interrupting the normal course of other city business. And that's why we're doing this evening, and that's why on the 13th, it doesn't interrupt any other city business. Otherwise, if you had this on either the 6th or the 20th, and you're showing up at City Hall for something that's not Monterey Downs, you're going to wait an awful long time, probably. So we're doing it for the sake of convenience for people who are engaged in city business that is not Monterey Downs. and asking the council to meet a couple extra nights.
That's reasonable. Especially, I haven't seen the agendas yet, but if they're loaded, they're loaded. But one of my biggest concerns with scheduling this so quickly is the fact that our city attorney will not be here, and he's been following along this for, I think, the entire project. He's one of the most knowledgeable people on this, and he will not be here for the next 2 meetings. And I think it would be, and we should consider scheduling this in such a way that we have a good representation.
It is true, unfortunately, I will not be here for the next 2 meetings, but we do have 2 attorneys that are even present this evening, from Richard Watson and Rashawn, and they are the ones that have actually worked on the preparation of all the documents and reviewed everything as well since the beginning. And there will be an experienced attorney, municipal attorney sitting in for me during the next 2 meetings. While he may not have the experience of this specific project, we do have 2 of our colleagues that have actually worked on the project from the beginning as well, and are more in depth, actually the wordsmithing of some of the documents, who will be available to answer any questions or make any presentations required.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Just one very easy question. As far as the process goes, if the council approves that EIR and all the other documents associated for point of interest or information, when does it go to FORA? Is that part of the process?
Yes, FORA is required to consider consistency with every action. First action, if approved, we would take the specific plan to FORA for consistency determination. Other applications that would require consistency determination, I believe, are the vesting tentative map, and some others as well. But we'll have that information for you as those applications come forward.
Now, in consideration of timing, the consistency determination by FORA, would they come before or after the DDA?
Well, since the DDA is not currently on an agenda, and we're not sure when that will be agendized, if the council approves the specific plan on the 13th, we could start the process with FORA on consistency of the specific plan right away. We would not have to wait for the DDA.
Thank you. Okay, no other questions?
Not for now.
Okay, we're going to have a lot of questions as we go along, so.
Leslie, would you put the applicant's presentation?
Thank you. Beth Palmer with Monterey Downs, and I'm going to walk you through our presentation. There is one thing I'd like to add first on water, because I actually don't have any water slides in my presentation, so I just wanted to maybe address it ahead of time. A couple of things that weren't added as part of the discussion that I think are important is that when Marina Coast Water District was chosen as the supplier for water in 1997, not only was it the supply of the 6,600 acre feet of groundwater, but they were also under contract to provide 2,400 acre feet of augmented water. They have to supply that to Fort Ord development and the Ord community by contract. They're required to do it. And in fact, they've started working on something, and it's a 55,000 foot long pipeline to supply recycled water throughout the base. And on July 8th, the FORA board voted to contribute $6 million from FORA fees toward that recycled water pipeline. It's important because one, of our 850 acre feet of water, 300 of that can be recycled water. So we would be able to reduce our number of potable water from that, and the pipeline is supposed to produce 1,427 acre feet per year. So 300 of ours would be able to come off of that. The other important thing is all of the development on Fort Ord, East Garrison, Marina Heights, when that comes into dunes, are actually all have dual plumbing. They are plumbing under construction for both recycled water and potable. You're required to put the recycled water in so that it's ready to go when the recycled water is available. So those developments, even though all of their landscaping and everything is off of potable water now, would be able to switch over to the recycled water from that pipeline, freeing up more potable water back into the unused allocations of the 6,600 acre feet of groundwater. And then the final thing to add on water is you, regardless of what you're allocated, when you're allocated water, the amount of water that any project can use is determined at the time they pull a building permit. So for example, University of the Dunes was approved at 0.33 acre feet per year for a house. 3 houses per acre feet of water. That's what they were approved at. In 2010, the state passed the Green Building Code that stated no house could use more than 0.25 acre feet, or 4 houses per acre feet of water per year. Just because that project was approved at 0.33 doesn't mean they can use it. They can only use 0.25 and they have to design the 0.25. So even though they were allocated that extra potable water, they are not able to use it because they have to meet the green building codes. That's of residential, they'll be the same for commercial. So in any project, you can look at it regardless of what you're allocated at the time, you have to build per the codes that are in place. So as it keeps getting more and more restrictive and looking at water and those restrictions, you have to look at what water would then become available, even though it's been allocated, it cannot be used because of the building codes that are in place. So I just thought those were some additional bits of information that are important to add about water. I can certainly add more information as I come back on the 13th, but I don't have any slides on water, so I thought it was important to add those. So what I'm going to focus on my presentation tonight is looking 3 major topics. 1, why development is necessary on Fort Ord, why this particular property we're looking at is appropriate and needs to be developed, and then why Monterey Downs is the right project for this property. So those are kind of my 3 big topics that I'm going to just go through in the presentation. So a little background of when we closed. You have the 28,000 acres, you lost the jobs, and you lost the people, and you lost the economic engine of former Fort Ord. So when the base closed, they had to decide what to do with the land. In 1991, when they found out that the base was going to be closed, the Army sent out requests for land. So you have the 28,000 acres of land, and they said, who wants land? 28 federal, state, and local agencies requested land on former Fort Ord. And this is the map without the yellow of all of the agencies and the land that they requested. The Bureau of Land Management chose 15,086.58 acres. So they were very exact in the land that they wanted. They had free rein to choose what they wanted. That is what they chose. California State Parks requested 2,020 acres. No agency in the 2 years of the 28 federal, state, and local agencies requested the land upon which Monterey Downs or any development is located. That's the highlighted land. So when the base reuse plan was put together, that's why development was chosen for those areas. It was the areas that nobody wanted that were set aside for development. So in taking this map and in looking at what agencies were requesting land as part of the base reuse plan, they created the land use map. So this is the original base reuse plan map of the land use designations. And Ford took years to put this base plan together. I mean, they started from the base closure in '94. It took 3 years, hundreds of meetings. They actually won an American Planning Association Outstanding Planning Award for this plan. And they did that because they took the 28,000 acres and they divided it up with 18,000 of habitat, 4,000 for open space visitor serving, 2,300 for education research, 2,000 residential, 1,500 office and retail, and then rights of ways would be a road, and then the Army did keep some. So in looking at this map that they put together, you can see this was how it was planned out in 1997. You can see where Monterey Downs is located. So we are in the development areas. And then we also talked about the 4 hotlands that was added from the land swap agreement. And we actually have the additional open space that was added. So this is the current map. And if we look at the base now, how it's built out, this is where we are. This is how you can see the green is the open space, and it's actually 21,000 and 28,000 acres on the base. The blue are educational facilities, so you have CSUMB, it's been established, that was part of the base reuse plan. You also have other educational facilities, Chartwell, UC Santa Cruz, MPC, all received land to expand their programs. That's the blue. The purple is land that the Army kept, government land, and then the blue, the pink is the development areas. And so that's where the job creation and the tax base. We put housing, non-military housing for civilian residents, create new businesses. So taking the base of the 3 E's, the environment, the education, and the economic recovery, this is how it's broken up today, and this is what the map looks like. So one of the things that we have to consider is Fort Ord was a closed military base for 100 years, and we're taking that base and we're now converting it and transitioning into civilian use. How do you do that, and what does that cost? Sure, there were some roads that went through it, but they were substandard internal Army roads that Jeeps and tanks drove on. They're certainly not public roads. You also couldn't go through the base. You had to go around it. The reason you had 1 in 68 is because you could not go through the base because it was a closed military base, but now you can. Now you can go through the base. The Army wasn't required to keep up with a lot of things. And so as part of the EIR and the mitigations and the transition from a military base to a civilian base, the original EIR for the base reuse plan set forth a lot of their mitigation measures that FORA was required to do. They've done many over the years, but they have some left. So looking at only the remaining obligations, what do they have going forward? You have habitat management at $44.9 million. All of the green land needs an endowment fund to maintain and care for it. That's $45 million to maintain the green. FORA still has some building removal requirements totaling $7.6 million. 5.4 is in C5, that is surplus too. So, and then Marina has some other parts. Transportation is $106.9 million. They have to complete the new roads that go through the base. They also have requirements to help support TAMC on 68, on 154, other regional obligations that they may not be in charge of putting in, but they have to financially contribute to. They also have a $16.1 million obligation for transit. That's buses, multimodal corridors, they still have to do that. Water is $24.2 million. Now they just authorized $6 million of that to go toward the project with Marina Coast, but their water requirements are $24.2 million, and the others are $27.6. That is broken down into smaller things, like there is prevailing wage compliance coordination. They have that scheduled out at $1 million. You have caretaker fees at $1 million. So all of those other things add up to $27.6 million. So the total obligations remaining to take this from a military base to a civilian area is $227.3 million. And that is what has to be done to complete the EIR mitigations from the EIR for the base reuse plan. That is how you transition this from military to civilian. So how do you pay for that? $227.3 million. Well, this is where we get the money. So undeveloped property, open space, doesn't pay anything. So it's a $45 million endowment fund, but we don't get anything toward that from there. So you look at new residential, $23,655 per unit goes into the fund to pay for those capital improvements. And then you have retail is just short of $64,000 per acre. So you look at the development, and these are in addition to all of the city fees, all of the county fees. So they're not in lieu of, they're in addition to all of the other fees that you have for building on former Fort Ord. So this is how the money is raised. So when the base reuse plan was put together, they came up with the numbers for the development and looked at them and figured out what the cost would be and what is needed to make sure we get those mitigations done. So this is why you have to have development on the base, because you have to have development. They're the ones, you have to transition this from a military base to a civilian use. These are the costs of doing that and getting that up into compliance, and the development is the party that pays for that. So I wanted to talk about the road system. EIR mitigation, EIR for the base reuse plan, put in mitigation for the roads. And again, you can go through the base when it was an active military base, you could only go around it. So now that you can actually go through the base, what is the traffic? And then how are you going to mitigate the new traffic from civilian use? So this was the original plan that was put in. There is, at the bottom, you can see a Highway 68 bypass. That was a 4-lane high-speed road designed to go through what is now the National Monument. The East Side roadway, the original, crossed there, was adjacent to where General Jim Moore, and then headed north through the CSUMB property. Additionally, there's an east-west connector, and that was how you would get traffic east to west. So as CSUMB came online, they said, we don't really want this road going through our campus. CSUMB said, we don't want it here, can you realign it? So in 2005, Tansy and Fora looked at it, trying to accommodate CSUMB, and said, what can we do to look at the roads? Is there a better option? Also, we really don't want this 4-lane expressway going through the BLM lands, now the National Monument. Let's take another look. So they did. And in 2005, they came up with this plan where instead they would improve South Boundary, they would improve General Jim Moore instead of putting another road in. They would put in eucalyptus and then connect that to a realigned east side roadway that does not go through CSUMB and then also eliminates the need for the east-west connector. This is the road system. So this is the system that was put in place in the original EIR mitigation plan, the requirement for these roads and an east-west connector through the base. So this is the plan that's been there. It's been there through 2005, and I wanted to kind of put that out there because I know there have been some questions that the roadways were required for our project. They're not. We actually had to design around them. And the important thing to remember is if you don't finish this roadway, then the projects that are approved stay on 1 and 68. There will be no other road for them to go to. So to alleviate that traffic, plus the new ones that have already been approved, you need to come up with a road system to go through the base and not just around it. So from here, I wanted to look at the specific area of land we're talking about in our project. So when looking at this exhibit from the specific plan, the area in blue is Seaside. In green to the north is Marina, and then white is unincorporated Monterey County. And then our project is outlined in orange. So the portion of the project of the base of the Seaside is in this location right now. You can see it in the thick red outline. It's a 66 acres of land in Seaside for this project without taking into consideration the county project or the portion of the veteran cemetery that's in Seaside. This land right around it has the 8-story Department of Defense building, the old hospital on the base. It's got military housing. It's got nurses' barracks, which are existing. That is a picture of the nurses' barracks that need to be taken down. An important thing to note about the nurses' barracks is that is a Seaside obligation. It's not part of the $7.6 million for FORA. It is not a FORA obligation, and it's not being collected as part of the developer fees. It is a wholly Seaside responsibility to remove. You also have the Eastside Parkway location, the Veterans Cemetery, and then MPC has an emergency vehicle training center designed for the property as well. So the property, these 66 acres, are completely surrounded by existing, will be in with a road near a emergency vehicle training center, military housing, 8-story building. We hear a lot about the oaks on the trees, and this is a question that came up earlier. Section 2.1.4 of the EIR for the base reuse plan The total number of oaks on the base is 4,760 acres of oaks on the base. So that is the total. They're removing a little over 1,000, and I know that number changed because of the land swap in Whispering Oaks, but the total acreage of oaks is 4,760. So our 315, while a large number, is actually only 6.6% of the oaks on the entire base. So we're looking at impacting 6.6%, and that is from the base reuse plan EIR. So for those 6.6, we've heard a lot about them, and we'll hear a lot about the trees on the site. This is the numbers, and you guys had this conversation a little bit earlier about the quality of the trees. And so we learned earlier that the dead and poor quality of trees are in the 30%. But if you add fair in there as well, you actually go up to 93%. So 93% of the trees on the site are either dead, poor, or fair quality, leaving only 7% a good quality or better tree. 24% of the trees are being preserved in the preserve area, and the remainder of those trees are mitigated 1-to-1, which can be done by transplanting, planting new trees on the site, planting off-site, paying a fee, and it's a mitigation that's worked out with the city. The city does it, it's not purely ours. So when looking at the mitigation, those trees, again, it's 6.6% of the trees on the base, and then we're looking at the trees that would be replaced with new quality trees that in addition to planting, we also have to monitor and ensure their health and well-being for no less than 8 years as part of a mitigation plan. So these are the trees that are on the site. In addition, we have to look at the dirt. Let's look at the dirt and what happens on this land and where it is. This is a flyer that Fora has going on right now, and it says a map entitled Central Happy Trails is being circulated that may mistakenly and inappropriately give members of the public the impression that portions of Parker Flats are open for biking and hiking. This is not the case. This is not land that's safe. This is land that was part of an active training base. It has not been cleaned up, and it has munitions of unexploded concern. While they did the first cleanup there, you do all of the final cleanup through construction. For example, right next to is the Veterans Cemetery. Last year, July of 2015, when they were constructing the columbarium, they came across a live 40mm projectile. A live 40mm projectile is one of the largest found on the base. It had to be detonated on site. That is adjacent to this property. So the important thing is while they did the initial cleanup, because it is land set aside for development, it was always anticipated and always planned that you would have a second round of cleanup that would go further and deeper using UXO construction support, who would be there the entire time to make sure that the land is safe and can be used. And so the important part of that is it was always planned for development, and it needs to occur in order for that land to be safe for use. This is a requirement of the owner of the property. So if the project isn't built on there and Seaside retains it, then Seaside retains that responsibility. It's an obligation that Seaside has for land that is undeveloped and not sold to someone else. So you have these munitions of concern. So what does Fora do about it? What is the state, EPA, DTSC? How do they make sure that everything is done and it's done safely and that the land is safe? What they do is they put on land use controls implementation plan is required for all areas in the cleanup areas on former corridor. These requirements include during construction, you have the UXO support, you have personnel there, somebody is there the entire time you're working on the property. But for long-term maintenance, you still have to do annual inspections, prepare these reports, you have CERCLA review, you have land use controls, assessment costs, personnel, you have to prepare incident reports, you have to have insurance policies, and the owner of the property is responsible for all of these things. If it's developed and you eventually get through and they've proven the cleanup, you can have these removed because you now know through the long-term maintenance of full cleanup that these things have been completed. If it's not constructed and you still have these concerns out there, then you would need to do all of these things in perpetuity, again, whoever owns that land be it Seaside or somebody else. So what is the cost of elusive? Well, the first thing to note about them is there's no funding in FORA for it. So it's not part of the CIP, it's not part of what a developer fees. The owner of the land is responsible for all of the costs. FORA estimates these costs to be $6 million through 2037. And they only calculated it out through 2037 because they assumed that the base will be fully built out by then. So there would be no need to continue. However, if it's not built out, that obligation would remain in perpetuity for those portions of the land that are not built. So in looking at this, you have to look, we're talking about 6.6% of the oak trees on the base that would be impacted by the project. If this land is kept as open space, the endowment fund, which is the current estimate of $45 million, goes up because you have more land. And so, but you don't have the development to pay for it. You also, without a developer taking the land, Seaside retains the obligations associated with that land, including the monitoring, the training the personnel, preparing the reports for anything that might be on there, because you're not going to go through the next step of fully cleaning it up, which can only be done through development. Seaside would also be fully responsible for these costs. So instead of money coming in to the City of Seaside General Fund from development, Seaside is going to have to pay money out of its general fund for this land. And that is the cost of keeping this land as open space due to the nature of the military activities that occurred on the site. The only way to clean it up and ensure its safety is to develop it. So the next question becomes, why is Monterey Downs the right project for this property? We've designed this property as a village. We have jobs, tourism, recreation, education, and residential components in the project all together. The project was designed with smart growth principles. If you look at where we're located next to an existing urban community. You have the military housing, you have the DOD building. We've put our housing next to the existing housing. The densest part of our project is adjacent to the existing urban community. We then transition to active recreation. So you have the tennis and swim club, you have the equestrian communities, you have a place for concerts, you have active recreation opportunities. From there, you transition to passive recreation, leading out onto the National Monument. So you put the densest part of your project next to the densest part of the city, and then you would move to active recreation and passive recreation. We talked about this earlier as well in what is allowed for this property. So if you look at the land, 2,248 units are allowed. We are proposing 1,536, and you would be permitted to put over 3.1 million square feet of non-residential. The 832,000 number includes not only Monterey Downs, but also the Seaside Courtyard, as well as the Veterans Cemetery. So the Monterey Downs project itself is 775,000. So less than a quarter of what would be allowed, 18% of what actually would be permitted elsewhere. An important thing to note is if Seaside doesn't annex the land, then the Seaside doesn't control what's permitted in the portions outside the current boundary. So the county could do what it wants with that up to its portion. So we could be looking at close to 3 million there. While that may seem like, they're not going to do it, again, you have all of the same liabilities. They would have all of the same lucid requirements and all of the risk in keeping that as open space. So without this being a part of Seaside, you would not get a say in control in what happens to the land immediately adjacent to you. So looking at the project, looking at the residential components, we have a variety of housing choices from single families, apartments, courtyard homes. We also have qualified worker lodging, which is for workers on site. There are 176 affordable housing units planned in our project. And so that's the number that we have in ours and how that's calculated per state law. And just so in answer to the question that was earlier, is under state law, affordable housing and your 20% is calculated off of your for sale units. And the reason it's not calculated, there was actually a case that went to the California Supreme Court that by requiring affordable units on rental units was a form of rent control and therefore illegal. So whether you would have any different change in your affordable unit count if you went to the full build out at 2248 would depend on whether what was being proposed were for sale units or rental units. If there were more rental units, if they were, all of those rental units or more even than what we were proposing for rental, then your actual affordable units count would go down. So it's not just a definite number of the way it's calculated because it depends on whether they're for sale or rent. So we also have a fire station site, tennis and swim center, and extended stay hotel in the portion. The hotel is an extended stay caters to business travelers, parents of students, guests attending events, people who want to come out, go to the National Monument. You have active recreation with the tennis and swim center, which offers both recreational and competitive sports to the community. The fire station site is just set aside should the city decide that they need a fire site in that location. If they don't, then it wouldn't need to be built there. We're just making the land available. Country Walk is an open-air town center. It's pedestrian only. It includes outdoor cafes, shops, restaurants, museums, farmers market. And again, new vehicles, it's a pedestrian only. We have an indoor sports arena that's planned. It's a 6,500 seat arena that can be reconfigured for a variety of events. And that would be anywhere between 5,000 seats and 6,500, just depending on the venue. You have sporting events require the whole floor, concerts allow floor seating, and so that's why, depending on how you configure it, depends on your seats. And so you have that multi-use facility as an indoor sports arena. On the equestrian side of it, on the training track, so again, we disagree with some of the assumptions on where racing is, but at this time, we've chosen not to disagree with staff and have chosen, the plan was always thoroughbred training with the potential for racing, and again, it was always a potential if we went and did the licensing and all of that. We've agreed to take the live racing out of the project, and so we are looking at a training track. A training track creates more than 700 jobs that you have, and it also has a variety of events that you can do with it. You have outdoor concerts, you can use the infield for youth activities, for fairs, all of those things. So it's still a multi-use facility. In looking at the Monterey Horse Park at the southern part of the project, they plan to host equestrian events and competitions in all disciplines throughout the year, and their shows last from 1 to 5 days. So the participants come in, they bring their horses, the riders, the trainers, the grooms, the families. They stay in hotels, they eat in the restaurants, they are visitors, and they have these events that come through. We've heard from some people about how they travel, people travel for these events. Having the competitions also allows them to create other community benefits, such as partnering with CSUMB, NPC to do different programs, to have equine therapists and local youth organizations, and direct benefits back to the community that they have with the facility. Here's something to look at. You know, in the past, when I would talk about how this project looks, I would always compare us to Del Mar, because Del Mar had the live racing, it had a horse park, it was near a residential area, and so I looked at it and said, hey, let's look at Del Mar to give you an idea of what it is. So now that we've taken the live racing out and we're looking at a training facility, it's more appropriate to look at a comparable facility. This is Galway Downs. It's 242 acres in Temecula. And if you take the training facility in that area, which is 138 acres, and the horse park, which is 110, we're right at the same size. So you have Galway Downs at the same acreage as what we're planning in Temecula. Its horse park has 14 arenas. Right now we're proposing 11. And they host around 35 horse shows and events per year. They're training, they have a 1 mile track and a 5/8 mile track. It's important to note that they added thoroughbred training in 2015. This is just something new that they added because it is growing and there is a need for it. So that is something that's brand new that they have actually added to their project. They have a polo field, they have 400 permanent stalls, 15 miles of trails, they have restaurants and event centers, and they contribute millions of dollars into the local economy annually. Again, they have all of those horse shows that come in. They have year-round training. They in fact have 2 training tracks of different lengths, newly added, as well as other recreational aspects. So instead now of looking to Del Mar, because it has a live racing, I would compare it to Galway Downs. They provide all of the training for the Southern California tracks. The horses train there and then go to the tracks. Monterey Downs would be this equivalent for the Northern California tracks. We don't have something here for those, so that they would take the southern part and we would take the northern part of the state to have that equivalent. So we talked about the open space that's in the property. One of the things that I'd like to add or point out is if you look at the dash lines that surround the project, what we've done is we've set the project back from the border to create a buffer zone. So depending on the topography, depending on where Eastside Parkway is and the rights of way go, it'll be anywhere between 30 and 100 feet wide. So when you're driving through, you have a buffer that has trails, that has trees, and everything setting the development back from the roads. So we do have trails throughout the project, and you can see those here. One thing that's important to note is the area right now, and I apologize, I should have showed it when I showed the property as it is now in the city of Seaside, but if you're looking at where people are walking on the property or going near the property now, once the Seaside Parkway is in, for them to reach the monument and reach the open space, they would actually have to cross that road. So one of the things that we've designed in is to bring the staging areas to the other side of the Eastside Parkway, so that you would park and be ready to go into the National Monument, into the open space from the proper side of the Eastside Parkway. So they've been relocated. And what those do, there are 2 trail and staging areas. They have one near Country Walk, and I've described these to you before, where people can come in, be right on Country Walk, come, have lunch, have coffee. They can go out into the open space. They can ride their horses, and they have the places for dogs to rest if they want to have lunch. And if people want to go to a more rural staging area, they can go to the one that is with the horse park, which would have parking and restrooms and some barns for the horses. Would not be right near the development, would be at the end, so they could go straight out into the 4 Hotlands, which is the county open space. Another important fact is we don't actually border the National Monument. Our project is not. You have the county open space, the 4 Hotlands, of what was added as part of the land swap as a buffer between our project and the National Monument. So we do not actually touch the National Monument in any location. So how do we work in with the Veteran Cemetery? So again, it is part of the 711 acres. It's right to the south of the project. That is the location there. Looking at the master plan, and I think staff touched about this a little bit, when the veteran community was trying to figure out how to pay for their cemetery and come up with the funds they needed, they created their own master plan and decided that their parcel of property north of Parker Flats would be sold off for development, and then the funds from that would be used for the rest of the cemetery. And so the columbarium that was started and opens in October is phase 1, but that is a columbarium only, so it's for urns. There's no in-ground burials in that phase. So in order to go to phase 2, they have to have an EIR, they have to go through all the environmental review. That was part of the funding that they needed. By including the project in our EIR, we're able to get that environmental review done for them. So they'll have that ready to go, they'll have that. Additionally, they have ancillary parcels for a museum, non-denominational chapel, Veterans Hall, amphitheater, that are not part of the state funding or the state cemetery or the federal funding, that have to be completely approved, built, maintained with local dollars. And so again, this also gets all of those approvals in place through the specific plan and the EIR, so they would be able to move forward with those. So that's the connection with the Veteran Cemetery. So looking at the project, we're looking at tourism and recreation by having a multi-use facilities where you can have festivals and fairs, gathering places, ecotourism, equestrian, shopping, dining, entertainment, tennis and swim. You have a facility with a little bit of everything, especially in the active recreation options. We also have expanded educational opportunities, looking at, especially in the fields of animal sciences, having new educational opportunities, providing again the recreation, part-time jobs for high school and college students. But a lot of what we offer are jobs, and this is what is desperately needed in the area. So per the economic impact report, the jobs that are created are 1,177 construction jobs that pay prevailing wage. And so it's important to note that all of the construction jobs on Fort Ord pay prevailing wage. With or without a PLA, everybody gets prevailing wage in construction. So there are an estimated 1,748 permanent jobs. Those are non-equestrian jobs, so that's office, hospitality, retail, recreation, and others. And then this number has lowered. We are actually at 715 equestrian jobs with training only. Adding those up, and these are direct jobs. Direct jobs are jobs that are actually employed right at Monterey Downs. So right at Monterey Downs, including the construction, including non-equestrian and equestrian, you're looking at 3,640 jobs directly at Monterey Downs. However, when you look at direct jobs, you have to look at also your indirect and your induced jobs and your economic impact. Because you have jobs at the project, but then you have other jobs and impacts off the direct site that also need to be reviewed. And indirect jobs are jobs that are not directly on the project, but are generated in business that supply goods and services to the components of the project. So in construction, that might be your lumber companies, or anybody in hotels, that your mattress companies, anybody who supplies goods and services to the project. Those jobs that are created due to the demand is an indirect job. You also have what's called induced jobs. Those are jobs and economic impacts that are created when the income from people who now have jobs and are working, they spend that money on items in the broader economy: food, clothing, entertainment. So those then give rise to a greater economy, and those are money that can be spent in downtown and Seaside proper. So people come, now that you have more people with jobs, through both the direct and the direct, they then go spend that money in the broader economy, creating those induced and economic impact jobs. Looking at construction jobs, you have 536 indirect and induced jobs, and operational jobs create 314 indirect and induced jobs, for a total of 850 indirect and induced jobs in addition to the direct jobs. And this is all part of what the economists did in the economic impact reports. We looked at that. It was peer reviewed by the city's economists, and they used multiplier effects and how they determine these. So in looking at both of the indirect and induced jobs as well as the direct jobs, you're looking at a total of more than 4,490 jobs as a result of having this project in place. Looking at the economic benefits, regionally, due to the number of houses and the acreage, our project pays about $40 million in 44 fees, which is almost 20% of the remaining obligations FORA has as part of their EIR mitigation. So we're about 20% of that. And those obligations, again, are $45 million for open space endowment, 17 for water, 107 for transportation. And then regionally from events, about $100 million goes back into the local economy. When Fort Ord was open, it was about $500 million. So again, it's bringing a portion of that back. If you're looking at the city of Seaside, one of the things, in addition to annual revenue from events, is we do have to purchase the land. So you do get purchase price proceeds from the sale of land to development. So that is there. And then you have annual revenue through the report approved in March. You're looking at $3.56 million to the city of Seaside in revenue. And then looking at the types of services and looking at the personnel, how you want to handle fire, your net can be anywhere from 700,000 to $1.9 million. It is a $750 million project on a cost to build. Just so put it in perspective, that's about half of what the dunes is. So we're looking at 750 million, and about 200 million on that is spent on labor, materials, and services within the city limits. One of the things to note from that report is the revenue estimates never included revenue from the events at the sports arena, the event center. So none of the racing was ever taken into consideration. So removal of that part of the project does not affect that report at all because it was never included. And in fact, you would probably need to redo it because the report did include the expenses from those employees who no longer are there. It's about 300 direct jobs that would not be created by taking that component out. And so your expenses, in fact, would go down because the report included all of the expenses, but did not include any of the revenue to make sure that it was as conservative as possible. And so that is my presentation, and as always, here for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've reached 10:30, and first I want to ask, how many people in the public are planning on speaking? Okay, so if we gave let's see, no, it's about almost 30. So what I'm suggesting is that we entertain a motion to extend the meeting to 11 o'clock and give everybody a minute to speak. Okay, then we'll continue the meeting to next Wednesday, and you can come back and speak then.
Yes.
Does that matter?
To the mayor.
Yes.
And that's why I was going to ask you, to give the public something you're thinking. The object is you guys have been here, you've been waiting, and so the object is to give you a chance to say something tonight instead of just trying to say come back at another meeting. So, whether it's 3 minutes or 2 minutes or 1 minute, at least you had an opportunity to say something tonight. And I think, whether it's a minute or 2 minutes, you should be able to say whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing. And so I'm just encouraging people to encourage the mayor to go with his original thinking, but I think that's part of his thinking. So I wanted them to know that, Mayor, and maybe you can give him some more of your thoughts and give some more feedback before you make your final decision.
1 minute is fair. I think that people can, if they're concise and stick to the facts and the elements of the EIR, they can get it said in a minute. What I'm trying to do is find a balance here. This was primarily a study session for the council. We're allowing public comment. So take it as you like it. We still haven't had a chance to deliberate and talk and discuss amongst ourselves. That hasn't happened. All we did was receive presentations. We asked a lot of questions, but we did not get a chance to do our part. So if we have public comment tonight and restrict it to a minute and we're wasting time, then everybody gets to say what they want to say. But that means when we come back to deliberate, I'm not going to have public comment again. But when we deliberate on the 13th, you'll have another bite at the apple. You've had several bites at the apple. You're going to have another bite at the apple, and you're going to have another bite at the apple when we go on the DDA and all the other elements. So it's not like you're being restricted from speaking your mind. Because I've seen many of you at our meetings before saying the things you're going to say tonight. So what's the pleasure of the body? I'm putting it in your hands. You want to speak tonight, or you want to speak at another time?
May I ask next week?
Well, if we're gonna open public comment, then,
Well, you asked
Okay.
input from the body. A great many people who would have liked to have spoken tonight could not stay this late. If they find out that tonight was the only opportunity to speak, I think they're going to be very upset.
it's not the only opportunity, because we're gonna be looking at this project for quite a while yet. But I suggest that we go to Wednesday night. Yes.
My understanding of what you just said, Mayor, is that if the public grabs this opportunity tonight, they can get up to a minute. And then when we meet on the 13th, you get another opportunity, which will probably be, a regular opportunity. If it's adopted, the EIR, you get another opportunity. So what I'm just saying is take advantage of your 60 seconds tonight. You're not losing anything, because we're not making a decision tonight. So we'll meet again, right? Every time we meet, I think you said they would have opportunity to say something.
No, if they do it tonight, we're not gonna do it, we have discussion. We're gonna have to convene to discuss. We haven't done, that's part of this meeting here.
Excuse me, Mayor, if I can interrupt for a quick second. If you're gonna continue it, that's fine, but if, on the 13th, people are going to have the opportunity to actually speak, and on the 20th, they'll have an opportunity to speak. Period.
Well, that's part of the process. We're not restricting public comment, it's just, we're out of time.
Excuse me, Mayor.
It would have been, maybe better to start earlier, but then we'll get complaints that it's too early for some people to get here. But this is a complex project, takes time to go through to do the due diligence. Yes, sir.
If you were thinking about the sentiment of the group who remains here tonight, you could ask for a standing vote, aye or nay, among us, and you would have a count.
Okay, well, let's do that. All those in favor of staying and having 1 minute of public comment, raise your hand. Stand. Stand.
Stay standing here. Good night.
Okay, those that are opposed to that idea. Looks like the ayes have it, so we'll stay and, 1 minute.
People got it.
Please don't comment on the stakes if we don't want to stay tonight, because my
Can't
brain
make
is
anybody
too
happy.
full and there's people in here.
I have a question. We have prepared comments for what originally I thought was up to 3 minutes to speak. I have narrowed it down to 2. Now you are saying 1. The first park in the city has had plenty of time to ask questions, and you will continue to be able to do that. People that may not be in support of that are going to need to give you a little bit more information. And I do not think 1 minute is appropriate or fair.
Mayor, Mayor, man.
Yes.
Thank you. This is what we're discussing right now. It's 4,000 pages, and I think it's not appropriate to allow the public a mere minute to discuss it. And one more thing, I want to just clarify on the, we will be having one vote on the 13th on certifying the EIR. There will be no more discussion on certifying the EIR on the 20th, because it'll be done. So I don't want anybody to think that they're gonna have another bite at that apple after the 13th. That was an error. So.
Okay, well then, I can't make everybody happy, I'm gonna make myself happy. We're gonna do this on Wednesday. We'll reschedule the meeting. Thank you very much. So at this point, I'm going to call for adjournment. We're going to continue the meeting to 5:30.
Wednesday at 5:30 in this room.
Our motion? Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Did you say 5:30?
Thank you, sir.